Yes, I believe that was it. So
Just
now
waited till 8 o'clock.
we started correctly on time, so I had to actually trigger it from the page. So people should be, yep, I just got all my notifications on my phone that said we're live. So people should hear us now. If only everybody knew how bad we were both screwing up until exactly the time to start. So can everybody hear us? Can everybody hear me now? We have video. Yep, that's what I had to do. I had to do it through the thing for the scheduled. I had to tell it that I'm ready to go. Yeah, everybody says we sound good. Okay, Andy, give yourself a sound check.
Hey, Andy, LSX Specialties here.
Everybody can hear me.
Am I supposed to be able to hear everybody also?
Let's just chat. You'll just hear me.
Okay.
Everybody says they can hear you. Yes. Okay. Well, I guess we're at 8:01 and this is the I forget, I'm trying to think of an interesting name for this. I was thinking of calling it like Saturday Night Live, Sloppy Night Live, Sloppy Saturday Night Live, something like that, SNL. Instead of my title for everything is like this long because it's like sloppy something radio show. So if I can call it SNL or what's that called, the hyphens or whatever, and not get sued by
Yeah.
NBC or something, that would be incredible. So we have Andy from LSX Specialties, and I believe you are sole owner operator.
I'm everything.
And I think you said you have one employee now.
That was in the past. It's all me by myself now.
All right. And Andy, you do a lot of things, so I'll try to quick summarize. We'll see how well I know you and you can make fun of me. So, I think you primarily do wiring and then you do tuning and maybe some other things, but tuning and wiring. Maybe wiring
That's
mostly.
Yeah, yep. I started out doing just wiring and getting more into tuning, and then I got into a bigger shop and started doing a lot more mechanical stuff. Headers and exhaust and cams and things like that. And it just got a little overwhelming, so kind of slowed down a little bit and just got back into wiring only.
Yeah, I was going to say, wow, I didn't know you did like installs and everything, but
Everything, yeah.
probably way too much to do. I know you probably have wiring backed up like crazy, so why start doing camshafts and everything else?
Yeah, it was kind of, yeah, yep. It got definitely in the way of wiring, which is what I'm known for. So I just went back to that, and I'm just gonna stick to it.
So do you want to say like I already said it, but do you want to say your business name, how long you've been doing it, and
LSX Specialties. I've been doing this stuff about 8 or 9 years. A legit shop for about 5 years. I focus mainly on stock ECU stuff. I do a lot of reworked harnesses. I build a lot of new ones. Um, I've gotten into the EFI source stuff, the Terminator stuff. I guess any Holley harness really. Just in the last couple months, I guess, cleaning them up, relocating things. Just kind of make it a little bit nicer than when they get it.
people had a bunch of questions about that, so it'll be cool to go over them. And also, I just sent you that nice, what do you want to call it, a PDM, power distribution module. Nothing crazy like programmable $1,000 one, but that really nice one that Stu makes.
Yeah, that's a nice little unit for sure. It has a bunch of things that you would normally have to add on separate from a typical standalone fuse box. So the tack wiring for has the resistor in it that people have to add in later, and it has a starter relay which typically don't come in the standalone harnesses, and a TCC wiring so you can kind of reverse the polarities using a relay rather than try to get a brake switch with dual circuits on it, and just a lot of stuff to make it easy for you.
Yeah, I know he gears it more towards the stock computer rewire, but I was like, have a whole Holley harness because I know you've done. I gave you the EFI source harness, and it's really awesome to see how well you build that out. And then I really want to see how well you do the Holley one, and also it gives you people don't necessarily want to send you something you haven't done, but then I'll hand it over and you'll hand it back, and I go, look at this, and everyone's like, all right, I'm sending stuff to Andy now.
Yeah, I guess I don't really advertise all the stuff I do. If somebody calls and asks me, I'll say yes, no. I haven't done that, but I'd like to get into it. Or I'm so busy, I don't want to, start advertising all this stuff and just get bombarded with it. So somebody like coil harnesses, I don't think people knew I made coil harnesses, but I just posted some pictures recently of some that somebody called and asked about.
Oh, nice. Well, I guess we will dive into some questions. I guess I always like to ask, and I want to give my wife credit, but before we talk about like business and everything else, I think it's funny to ask people like, what was your first car? What got you into cars? And what got you into the job you do now?
I guess the one car that kind of got me into all this stuff is my Nova. A lot of people know me by my Nova. It's a 62. And I've had that thing 16 years this year. So it's had multiple engines in it, transmissions. And it started out with a 6-liter swap in 2013. And then it just turned into this. It's had multiple engines in it. It's been turbocharged. I've had, it's got an LSA on it now. I've had Gen 3, Gen 4 stuff in it, automatics and manuals. Just kind of like it's been my guinea pig to learn all this stuff.
And then what was
firsthand
was that your first car?
Firsthand learning.
Oh.
No, it wasn't my first car, but it's my favorite car, and it's the one that I've gotten in the most trouble with and went the fastest times at the track with, and it's just the one everybody knows me by.
So that's your favorite, obviously.
Definitely my favorite, yeah.
And then what's the first car you ever had?
Oh my gosh, the one I learned to drive in, and the first car I drove to high school was 1974 Honda CBCC.
Wow. This is a Honda CBC. How dare you?
Yeah. It was a little orange one.
And then what was the other one? What got you into cars?
My dad, he's always had some kind of hot rod, so it's always been around.
That's awesome. So that's it for my simple ones. Icebreakers, I guess you could say. Because people have some good ones. People are always like, what's your favorite horror movie? What's your favorite pizza? And I want to leave that to them. Because I think those are funny too, like non-car questions. So maybe people will throw them down in there also. So what is this? I'm going to proofread these before I say them out loud. Because I'm like, I can't think and read at the same time. Oh, okay. My sloppy build is up and running thanks to you all. It runs good while accelerating and driving, but dies when I come to a stop sign. Thoughts? I don't think it's the VSS or TPS. I've done some reading, and I don't know if I have the scan tool to read percentage on the throttle body. Well, I'll take a wild stab. He probably has a TH400 or a manual and doesn't have the vehicle speed, so he'd have to clarify on that.
If it has a large cam in it, there's a lot of stuff people, new tuners that don't understand how to get stuff to idle right. Going through all the steps, they'll just drill a hole in the throttle body or something like that. So I don't know. It could be a number of things for sure.
Yeah, like he said, it's good while accelerating and driving. I wonder if it idles well at all, or I would assume. He says, I don't know if I have a scan tool to read, so we're assuming stock computer, but there's a lot of times the people ask and it's a can of worms answer. It's hard to give them a black and white, right?
Absolutely.
So that's usually dependent on the tune unless he has some kind of vacuum leak or something mechanical doing that to him. Well, Matt Bowden, he says, what's a starting price to do a Holley Terminator X integration? Obviously it's vehicle specific. Let's assume 1500 or 2500. So you've probably seen, like me and some other people have been doing that.
Yes.
Where they install both, but that's probably
I haven't done anything like that. Yeah, it's all been basic standalone stuff, never an integration yet.
And I would say to him, the tricky part about that is almost every chassis and year is different. So it's hard to sell like a complete plug and play. Other than like a few things that plug in to get you going, but the small things you're probably going to have to do yourself.
Yep. I've seen somebody floating around on the Facebook pages that does offer something like exactly what he's asking. for that body truck. I'm not sure what his name was, but it seemed like a nice setup.
Yeah, I've seen one or two of them. Like that's what I said. Like they're very dependent.
Yeah, you can probably get something that splits the coolant temp and splits the cam and crank sensor, but that may be just the extent of it.
Yeah, I've made them actually, and I keep thinking about selling them. And I think I've made them for like three people, and they've plugged them in and they worked. So, but I don't know if I want to make them or if there's decent profit or what people will pay because it's plug and play and it does that aspect. But then people are like, my range selector doesn't work, and this doesn't work, and my speedometer doesn't work, and it starts to snowball. So, part of me
It's
like
tough to get into that stuff. Yeah.
I don't want to assume responsibility for making everything work because I sold them a splitter harness. Uh, all right. Well, he says, yeah, that's what it is. I mean, an integration harness. Not many people do, and Andy isn't interested right now, it seems.
Yeah, that stuff's it's pretty involved, and it takes quite a bit of time to make sure. And I have no way to test that stuff before it gets sent to you.
Yeah.
Is another big thing. I like to be able to make sure everything's 100%. It's not always the case. I can't test everything, and I don't test everything. Um, it just doesn't always work.
And then Mike Reasoner, or Reasoner, or whatever, however you pronounce his name, he goes, "What is a good tape to wrap wires with, like stock?"
I'm the last person to ask because I'm kind of known for my seamless loom, and I don't use tape on anything. Um, that's a terrible question to ask me, I
Well, you
guess.
can say, I
um,
recommend no tape at all. It should be
yeah,
loomed and heat shrunk everywhere.
that's all I do. Yeah, I don't do my little coil harnesses are all heat shrink and seamless loom. It's not the seamed nylon. It's actually seamless. All the wires get fed through, end to end. So, but yeah, I don't use any tape. I think it's ugly. I think that when it gets hot under your hood, it just makes everything stick together and a disaster to go back through.
It does turn into goo. Everybody that's
Yeah,
taken something apart with electrical tape knows it turns into goo.
yeah.
I
And
would
even
say,
if it doesn't get hot and it's just like a brand new harness that's kind of a low dollar setup, it's just gooey right when you pull it off.
yeah, immediately. Well, I mean, I use tape sometimes, half the time, and what I like is that it's called Tessa tape. It's the
It's like a
fabric
fabric.
tape.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that the best because it doesn't do the slime. It looks pretty good. It doesn't look like 1 cent plastic wrap. And then what always happens to me is I don't have 100-foot rolls of the wire loom that I need. So I always have a loom that's gigantic for like two wires, or I can't fit my wires in a small one. So the tape is just an easy out for me that looks good. Except for people like you see it and you're like, oh, you taped 6 feet of this, you jerk.
I got away from all that stuff because that's common. Everybody uses tape, and I got to stand out. I got to be a little different. So that's my trademark.
Oh yeah, I think this is pretty important. I read a little bit about it, so I don't want to be a huge advocate of it, but Tim Webb says everyone look over and consider signing the RPM Act. I've had a bunch of people say that I should talk about it. So apparently it's something for the government to stop overstepping on the EPA, which would greatly impact what you do since you sell swap stuff and everything else. If they suddenly made everything you do illegal along with every other motorsport person involved that knows about this, that would be bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've read into it a little bit here and there as it pokes up.
All right.
But most
And
of the stuff, I guess, and where I'm from anyway, I work on a lot of classic vehicles for the standalone stuff. So it's not breaking any kind of emission rules going into a classic. So that's kind of where I'm directed is, off-road stuff like tube chassis buggies and things like that, like real off-road stuff and, show cars. And I don't know, it's going to affect me, I'm sure, eventually, but it's not as bad as it's getting some people affected.
because essentially, as far as I understand, what they're pushing is you can't make anything an off road or a race car. So if it ever was a car, it's illegal that you built it into a buggy off road. So if you had something that was a Jeep or a Toyota Tacoma 30 years ago and you
Right.
LS swapped it and put long travel shocks on it, that's illegal.
Yes.
If it never sees the road again, it's illegal because it was a converted road car, technically. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I actually signed it. I didn't get to read any of it, but people I know told me to, so I just did real quick. And then, well, we have the one I asked you earlier. He goes, ask him why they call him Crazy Andy.
That's just been a filthy nickname that's followed me around for like 20 years. It's like a bunch of little things that added up into the nickname, we'll say.
Yeah,
It was not one single event that created it.
it's too long of a story to share.
Yeah.
Frank asked the question here. He goes, how do you not get overwhelmed with work?
I do.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say he more than likely is overwhelmed with work all the time. So
Yeah, my phone's nonstop, and people are, hey, you're slow, but that's exactly the opposite of what I'm doing. I'm behind,
hmm.
not slow, but behind. So, I'm working 60 or 70 hours a week, just hands-on harnesses. It's all I do.
It seems
I
like.
think a,
Go ahead.
I think a lot of people think this is like my side job kind of thing, but it's not it at all. This is how I make a living. It's full time, so I'm constantly doing it.
I think also we've had a bunch of people that are busy, like wildly busy. So I think anybody that's good at what they do is wildly busy. So that's something to consider. Like Joe Simpson is in the chat also, and he shared the same things. Like incredibly busy, don't have the time to do everything I want to do. So he had to quit on his fab stuff to do more of the tuning and focus on other things because there's just, he has too much stuff to do and stuff that's a waste of time and money also. So,
Yep, that's exactly why I'm back to wiring only.
then what do we have here? Oh, this is a good one. I think I know what this is. He says, Joe Joe asks, have you ever looked into coyote swap harnesses? I guess they're called power packs, like the whole spiel. And I guess that means, would you ever build one, or do you know what they? I don't even know. I've never heard of power pack. I'm just assuming because he says coyote swap harness.
I've never done one. I've been asked quite a bit, and I wish I had more time. But yeah, that's definitely something that's getting as popular as LS stuff in the last year or so. But I have got a lot of calls, and I just, like I said, I wish I had the time to spend on it and get an engine here and get it all going.
It's something you would need to. Obviously, people want you to do stuff like the Holley. People want you to do it, but you're like, I haven't done as many as my stock harnesses, so I don't know. I don't know the time limit of cranking it out and learning it to be able to give you an estimate on time and everything else, right?
Yeah, and I just haven't even had one in my hands to kind of see what they need to be done to them.
Well, we could say, hey, if someone has that stuff laying around and you want to give Andy unlimited time to investigate it, go ahead and ship him it.
I'm all open.
Because that's what I did with the Terminator and PDU or whatever. I'm like, here, whatever, in your spare time. That's always the joke,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
it gives you an opportunity to learn about it and then advertise it. So I'm like, here you go. Oh yeah, we'll mention I have used a bunch of your harnesses and I have recommended most of my friends, if they don't want to do it themselves, to just get it from you. And you guys should just look at his. I pasted your Facebook link in here so people can check it out. But from me looking at what you do to a stock harness, it doesn't even look like a stock harness. It looks so good. It looks like one of those companies like you would order from, like Rywire, one of those places that's really well known for making incredibly clean harness. That's what yours look like. And then
And that's what it was all ugly in my car. The very first time I did this, the reason I actually did my first harness is because I was in Las Vegas, I lived there at the time, and nobody was doing this stuff. And I couldn't find anybody that wanted to try it. So I was like, I'll just figure this out. A friend here in Oregon had done one just before me, so we were on the phone a lot, going back and forth, and got it all done, and it was just wrapped with tape also. And I'm like, man, that is terrible, terrible. So the next one I did, I made sure to take the extra time to make it look nice, and then that's what kind of snowballed into this. Everybody's like, hey, can you do that to mine? And it was just word of mouth from there.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say where this is a good question. I have so many people I want to put on this show. I'm trying not to do like too many at the same time because I have another friend who does wire. I have like at least two others. I have Race Wires, Troy Baum, and Devin Vanderhoof, who owns Hate Crime Racing, and they all do like high-end race car custom Holley stuff, mostly like complete what is it, the race pack PDU and everything, all the programmable stuff. So it'll be neat to have them, but I don't want to have too many in a row. But I'm squirreling here. My question is, how did you learn how to wire, or did you just look stuff up and start getting better on your own, or?
Yeah, that's it exactly. I just kind of trial and error. What worked best, I kind of know what size wire needs what size fuse and what you can pull through it for amperage and things like that, the basics. And then, I mean, anybody can really do this stuff, but the aesthetic part of it is what I'm known for.
And I would say, I was gonna guess you probably learned on your own because what you build doesn't look like anybody else I know. Everyone has all the self-taught people have their own particular style.
Yes, yep.
And then what is this? Oh, so someone has maybe an inappropriate question, but I don't think you'll care. They said, "What happened to your tooth?"
Oh, that was a crazy Andy story.
Is it one that can't be repeated? It's just that's what happened.
It was a headbutt.
Oh, nice. That's wonderful. I always say to people, I don't know if I've said it very often, but I say it on my Facebook all the time. I have like a weird cluster where I have teeth on top of each other, and it's getting more annoying the older I get. They're like overlapping. And I keep saying to my dentist, I'm like, I'm just going to tear it out one day with pliers. And he's like, please don't do that. And I keep saying, I've always admired Ken Block's platinum tooth. I think it was gold and then he changed it. I think he got self-conscious of it and he changed it a few times. But I keep saying, I'm going to pull both and get one giant platinum tooth.
Oh, yeah.
And then I said, for my 40th birthday present, I want to get that done. And my wife is always like, I'll pay for that.
I kind of like it. It's everybody picks on it, but I can eat spaghetti better than I used to.
No, yeah, I admire physical defects. It's like a weird thing, but yeah. All right. People have a bunch of questions here. This is a good one. He says, how do you think the Terminator has changed the standalone game? Are you an advocate for it? And did you have to make any change or part of your business because of it?
Good question. That's somebody asked me that. I get that asked all the time, actually, when people call. I don't think it's affected anything I do at all. I'm not for it or against it. I think that a lot of people buy it when they could use something like a stock harness. Like they just want to get it because everybody else is using it, but they buy it and then they pay somebody to tune it, and then they have somebody, install it. It's like they don't use any of the cool features that it's known to have. And I don't know. I guess I have been constantly booked out for 4 months, and that hasn't changed with anything that's happened in the wiring world.
I was going to say, same thing. You probably have such a backlog and so much work with a stock harness that it doesn't matter. And that's obviously like,
No.
I sent you the gold box stuff just so you could get your feet wet with it and see. And I was like, man, this is incredible. It's just like everything else you build. And then I was going to build something with what Stu sent me. And I was like, I will do this a great disservice. So that's when I hit up you and I'm like, do you want all this with no timeline to just investigate? And then since you are 100% wiring guy, you're professional, you can better evaluate this from Stu. I'm like, this looks cool, but I don't know enough to know if this is like rated for current or seems to work well or whatever else. It just seems like the connector and board is very high quality and useful in my opinion.
Very well thought out. Yeah, it has all the cool little features that you would want to do and add on to something all in one unit. So yeah, it's definitely nice. I haven't hooked it up yet, but it's very nice.
I just like that it has relays and everything and a good connector. And I would say one of my favorite thing, I'm always attracted to those power management units that have the single stud and it feeds all the stuff. Because making those plastic things, not that there's anything against them, but having all the power wires looped and everything else is kind of annoying. One of those big blocks is very attractive, but a PDU PDM is $1,000 to $2,000.
Yeah, those things they're pretty compact. Compact. They're about the size of like an E38 ECU.
Yeah, I was impressed, and it almost has a similar E38 connector, in my opinion.
Yeah, yep.
It's very close.
Yeah, the seal. There's the cover that goes over the fuses and relays. It has a seal, so I mean it's a weatherproof unit. It could be mounted under the hood. It's real nice.
The only thing it's not is completely potted, but I noticed it's serviceable. You can take it. I pulled it apart, pulled the board out and everything, just to investigate what it looked like inside. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then it even has a main fuse too for the whole. Everything's
a maxi fuse, yeah.
Everything's fused internally, and there's relays in it and everything. Like you said, it has. They definitely built it to handle everything you could think of. It even has like fuel pump relays and everything.
It has those little LED indicators for a bad fuse also.
If it's blown, yeah, incredible. But I don't remember where we started, so we'll go to another question.
It was a question about the Holley stuff coming out. Has it affected me?
Oh yeah, and not at all. So they might be thinking it's taking business from you, whereas not at all, and it might be good business for you at some point.
I think that the people that decided, I've had a couple people that, like when you brought your stuff out and kind of was showing everybody what it was all about, pulled their harnesses back from me, but they needed all the stuff that it had to offer. So I think that their vehicle is going to be better off with it.
Oh yeah, we talked about that, and that's something totally different that you see and I see. Like the stock computer people that want something from you just need it to drive and want it to look nice. But I would say most of the people I tune and see want to bump, want to do boost control, want to do ethanol, want to do that stuff. And then I would say the biggest takeoff from the whole Holley setup is most people can't get their setup to run for whatever reason. And that I always say you can Game Boy it and get it running and started and get it somewhere. No, it's so hard to do that otherwise.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly the difference. The stuff that I like to work on is basic swap stuff. Not a lot of race cars or big horsepower stuff. So yeah, there's two different ends of the LS swap world that need two different types of electrical.
Yeah, it's interesting you said like it doesn't affect you because nobody really needs all that in your world.
Yeah, when I'm known for rebuilding stock harnesses, they don't care about aftermarket stuff or spending big dollars on anything that's what they don't need.
All right, this guy, I recognize his name from previous live setups here. He's always in the chat, but his name is Potato R33. But he has a bunch of questions which are pretty cool. So he says, what is someone's or your biggest beginner mistakes that you see?
Like as far as the harness stuff goes, I think people they'll send me stuff that's half done that they've started on or their friends started on, and I always see every power wire in the harness get just wrapped together to like one single 10 gauge power wire, and they just hook it on a toggle switch, and that's it. I see that more often than not.
That's awesome.
And it's horrible, and I'm glad they kind of stopped before they have a fire or something, because there's no fuses when they do that.
I remember.
They could probably
go ahead.
They can get them running, but I would say that's very, very temporary.
So most beginner issues are no fuses and combining way too much stuff into the same circuit. All of the above.
Yes.
And then I was going to say the same thing. When we were talking about you doing a harness for my one project, I think the first one you did for me was the last rendition of the Colorado, which funny enough is the Don't BS Me build, which I would say is the most popular thing I've ever done because it's so easy to copy and everything else. So you did that harness, and I remember talking to you like 5 times. I'm like, this is I all I have. It is ugly and it is cut up and I don't know what's on it and the wires are disgusting and the connectors are filled with mud. And you're like, dude, that's what I get every day. You're not
Yeah,
disappointing me or doing me a disservice. Everything is disgusting and cut and doesn't work. So, like you said, people fail and then send it to you. So you're like, it's no difference. Just send it to me. I don't care.
yeah, yeah. I've got boxes and boxes and boxes of parts that I've cut or harnesses I've cut apart and keep the old sensors and connectors, and um, I just rewire it with new wire, new pins. Because a lot of that stuff that's really worn out and been on and off multiple times, they have pin tension issues. So I'll just replace pins and
Or corrosion. They're all green.
yeah, yeah. If they've been soaking somewhere with some water on them or whatever. The car's wrecked and the hood has been bent up and it's just out in the rain, and they buy this donor engine out of this wrecked vehicle that's been out in the weather forever. But yeah, it doesn't matter. I get all kinds of stuff sent here.
And then the other question he has is, what's the most spectacular failure you've seen?
From me?
Yes. Or
Oh
you
my God.
you or like you caused or you've just seen period. Well, you can choose whichever one.
Oh my gosh. So on my own stuff, like my Nova, I got better at tuning every time I did something different to it. Um, and I broke a couple of connecting rods in one of my engines, and that was like everybody's done it, everybody's seen it, but where I'm from, there's not a lot of this stuff happening. Like there's seriously probably less than 20 LS swap vehicles like within a 100-mile radius of me.
Oh wow.
There's just nothing happening here. Um, so yeah, I blew my engine up and I was like, oh, this is gonna look bad because I'm charging people for tuning, and now that I've been working on this thing and I just scattered this engine, what are people gonna think?
Yeah, no, and most of the time, 90% of the time, I don't push anybody's stuff. I push my own, which I think that's what gets me. Sometimes people look at what I do and they get upset. Like, why would you go to this guy? He shows videos of him scattering stuff constantly. And I'm like, well, I'm pushing past what I'm comfortable with, and I would never tune your car like that unless I know you and you absolutely agree that whatever happens, happens.
You know all the limits for that reason, yeah.
Because before, like I always say to people, every year we find a way to make 100 extra horsepower safely. And it's almost like Moore's law with computing. It just keeps growing at two times, two times, two times, like 100 extra horsepower. It hasn't stopped yet. So now,
Right.
like a couple years ago, you were like, I'm making 500, and people are like, that's a time bomb. You are stupid. And then now you make 500, and people go, what the hell's wrong? What happened?
That's happening right now with one of my local friends. You know, he started a family and, you know, got involved with his job and blah, blah, blah. So his car's been sitting for like 10 years. And then he just called me a couple of weeks ago. He's like, hey, I want to do something to my car. I'm finally getting back into it. And he was telling me he wants to build an engine and try to run in the 12s. I'm like, what? Why?
12s? Jesus. What are you buying? Like, I think, have you seen that? Off subject here, but funny. Have you seen that Toyota Yaris GR4 or whatever it is, the newest? I think it might only be in Australia. The fullboost.com.au guys did a review on it. It's a 3-cylinder turbo 4-wheel drive Yaris. It goes a 1290 stock.
Oh my gosh,
That's
that's
pretty
awesome.
disgusting for a
Yeah.
3-cylinder. Anyway, like people are like, "Oh, 12s." I'm like, 3-cylinder Yaris does that now.
Yeah.
Uh, and I remember in 2003 or so, I knew a guy that got a C5 Z06, and he went like a 1220, and it was like the fastest time anybody had ever seen for a while. And now a Yaris goes a 1290 stock. So yeah, it's something to consider. And then I guess I would like to share a funny one that I can just think of in my head. Most spectacular failure. Maybe not most spectacular, but the funniest, weirdest, most expensive failure I've ever seen was someone was renting Dyno Time from us like 10 years ago. And they had this like big block pro mod Hemi car on. And we have an inertia dyno only, and this car was like, it sounded like it was taking forever to wind out the inertia dyno. And I was talking to, I forget who was there, one of my friends or the owner, Troy, maybe even Ryan Gregory, one of my friends. And I'm like, does that sound like it's struggling to rev? And I said that, and it went boom, and it came apart. And it, coolant, oil, everything everywhere. It shot out a piece of the bottom of the big end of the rod out onto the floor through the oil, and it was like white hot. And then it started to cool off, and then it started to burn the oil puddle it was in. And just seeing, like, I'm like, what the hell is that? It looked like an aluminum piston because it was so hot. And then it just started to go from like white to orange and whatever, and just started smoking all the oil in there. And I was like, this is probably $50,000 engine here. It just puked. So that's like spectacular, I think. Not because it's a small, like a SBE 5.3 coming apart, but because it's what you would expect to not blow up for once. Because people
They took the time to make it not blow up, yeah.
oh, it's built right. And I'm like, it just
Yeah.
scattered a rod out that was white hot. Like, how did it get white hot? Anyway, that had to be getting some heat for a long time, and no one cared. So he has even more questions, and they seem pretty good. We'll keep going through them. Most useful tip in running an extra this or that for future upgradability? Like heavier gauge. Oh, since you're a wiring guy, what would you add into harnesses for future upgradability? So when you have a bigger pump or other. So I know you don't do that much on the stock harnesses, but if you were to wire something on your own and you were thinking of stuff ahead of time, was there like a most popular or useful thing that you do on top of?
So if I'm running like a big length, front to back of the car kind of thing, I'll always add extra wires in there for exactly like you said. If I'm gonna add a pump later, I'll just make double the bundle that needs to go through there. Just because I use seamless loom, it's difficult to get back into it later. So the wires are there. Um, I guess that's maybe the best way
A
to
little
answer
bit of
that.
extras, yeah.
Yeah, I always add extras if it's a full length. You're running from front to back or under the hood through a grommet in the firewall or something like that. That's gonna be difficult to get into later. I always add extra.
I guess you would say for him to be an easy answer, you would do like two extra 10 gauge
Yeah.
and then a few small ones for triggers or sensors. What you might not like it, but what I got into is buying uh, coupled together wire. Like what's it called? Like 3x18. So it's three 18 gauge wires in one sleeve.
Like speaker wire kind of in a
Yeah,
way.
kind of, but automotive based. Like not like stranded or not like crappy looking speaker wire, but it's actually in a nice thick sleeve. Holley gives them out for their sensor stuff. So it has three wires, and then it's shielded, and then it's in a pretty heavy
Oh, I
vinyl
know. It
nylon, yeah, jacket.
looks like a coax almost.
Almost, yeah, but it's got the nylon in it, the double weave nylon, so it's real strong and doesn't rip and everything else. And I have like I've been buying like a 3 strand to do pressure sensors, and I bought a 4 strand and a 6 strand. So what I did in like my G is I ran a 4 strand and then I did a nitrous pressure. So I feel like that's easier. You pull one wire and it's essentially 4 wires.
Right. Yeah.
So
No,
in
that's
the
a good idea.
and the 3 was a 5-volt pressure sensor for nitrous, and then the fourth wire I used to just trigger the relay in the trunk for the bottle heater.
Perfect.
So I feel like that's
Yeah.
a good solution for low voltage is pulling like the 6x12 or whatever, 6x20 or whatever it's called. It's called something like that. And you can buy like 100 feet of it for 20, $50 depending on gauge and how many wires are in it. And I've always struggled with how to have too many or too little. And those are nice. Like you pull 2 of those and it's jacketed and it looks clean and everything else. So he might enjoy that tip.
Yeah, that's nice stuff.
And he says, what's your favorite automotive connector? That's an interesting question.
Automotive connector. Everything I deal with is all the stock weather pack stuff, the Metri pack stuff, and that's pretty much all I deal with, I guess. So I don't know if I have a favorite.
Yeah, well, yeah, so you say that's pretty much. I got really into the DT connectors over the last few months. Because what I do is I screw up a lot or I I've been getting better, but I'll pin stuff wrong or want to change things or add things, and then I have, and that because I change stuff all the time, and I don't have enough foresight like you to get it done ahead of time. So then I come back and I'm like, oh, now I'm kind of screwed. So I like the DTs because I can move the pins, add pins. If you have a 4-pin connector and you use 3 and then you realize you need 3 more, you can pull all the pins and put a 6, an 8, or a 12 and just repin. You don't get penalized. So
Right.
I like that. So I could offer that suggestion. Not always useful or cost effective. Certainly, they're not great for high current either, unless you buy a specialty larger connector.
And sometimes those high current circuits, you don't want a bunch of joints in it if you can avoid them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this one, I'll take one from the live chat just for fun because we've been doing so many of this guys in a row. He goes, what's everyone's opinion on the NTK PowerDex air fuel ratio monitor kit? My AEM is no good. So do you have any preference
I
on wide bands?
I've always used
Okay.
Innovate, the LC2. That's what I've had forever and just always used. I know a lot of people don't like those either, but I've never had any bad luck with it, and it's you can free air calibrate it. A lot of guys are against that also, but that's what I use and that's what I like, and it's been good.
It's funny you say that. I like having people with contrast because most of the time people agree with me, and that's great and all, but nobody learns from it.
Right.
So I haven't used much of the NTKs. I feel like I don't ever need to use them in my application. One day, if I'm tuning methanol cars or something like that, I think it's pertinent. I think a lot of people say that the Terminator Bosch LSU 4.9 is bad because it dies very easily, but I have seen and tuned and built so many cars with the 4.9 and never had an issue with it that I always want to blame the person installing it, trying to make it neat and putting it underneath something, and then it gets saturated with water and it goes bad in like 8 hours.
People will try to put those bungs and hide them so
Yep.
they bend the wires really
It's
super
got
tight
to be
at the sensor.
pretty. That's
Yeah,
stupid
yeah,
shit. Anyway,
yeah.
so
It's not always a good thing.
and then like this guy says my AEM is bad, and I've used, like you said, you've used Innovates, you trust them. I've used AEMs. I still have an AEM at the dyno when there's nothing else to use and someone doesn't have a wideband and I'm doing a stock computer. I have a tailpipe sniffer made out of a C-clamp with a thick wall 2-inch pipe, and it has a O2 bung in it, and I clamp it with the C-clamp to someone's exhaust tailpipe, and it's an AEM that I keep in like a duffel bag with a laptop power supply, and I've used it for like 10 years, and it's that same sensor, and it gets abused and thrown all over on the floor at the dyno, and I trust it. I trust those widebands, so I don't know what to say to people. If they just find whatever works for you. I think a lot of the tuners I know are like, get the NTK, the $500 NTK box, or nothing else. But again, I'm like, for someone at home, I don't think that's necessary. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if there was something that was legitimately better than the next, it would be more popular. I think they're all kind of equally popular for their own reasons.
Yeah. And then what do we got here? Eventually, do you think Holley will sell just the ECU by itself and you'll have aftermarket harnesses? Well, what's funny is I don't think people realize it's not easy to find, but you can buy the ECU by itself now. You could always buy an HP Dominator, and right when Terminator came out, they weren't piecemealing because they were having trouble keeping supply and demand. But as I know of many months ago, you can buy just the computer. So you probably don't know that, but you don't sell them or.
No. So the harnesses, you can get all the pieces to build them new also. So
Yeah, it's a
I
tight.
don't have to rebuild. I can start fresh also.
It's like a Tyco connector, and it's same on a Haltech, and I think a bunch of other, because I think people are like, oh, they just copied it. I'm like, it's a Tyco connector. It's no one copied anybody. That's like
It,
if a Bosch, people start using the Bosch wideband, and they're like, oh, everybody copied the Bosch. Well, it's a Bosch wideband, so
yeah,
everyone's
it's
used.
it's out there for everybody.
Yeah, whatever. Uh, what is this? Oh, this guy's saying, could you do a bulkhead connector for a Terminator?
So those things, I don't know. I've seen people do. I haven't done any. People don't like the fact that you got to get multiple connectors to have that many wires go through. So it takes up more space than just a grommet.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess this
Um,
is multifaceted. He says he built his own harness for a Megasquirt LS swap. Not good aesthetics. The Holley harness was pretty much light years ahead. Could you do a? I think what he means by, I read the end where it says bulkhead connector. I think he means a conversion or a patch harness from Megasquirt to Terminator, which there's so many versions of Megasquirt that would be completely application specific and might not work out.
yeah, that's one of those custom things that you just got to kind of know what you have to know where to go.
Yeah. All right, here's another one. What kind of microcontroller based vehicle control would be cool or useful, like a drive-by-wire TPS injector for cruise control?
What?
I think he means like if you could add a small device that would aid with what you do into a harness, like he says, cruise control. So if you don't have cruise control, if you could add a box that adds cruise control, or if you could do a simple box that adds flex to a non-flex stock computer, or I'm just speculating.
I don't know. It just seems like, like all the little cruise control. We'll start with that. Like if it's a P59 and it's a drive-by-wire, I make the little relays, relay unit to just hook in the wires and make the cruise control very simple that way. That's something, again, I don't advertise all that stuff, but I've done. But add-on stuff, I mean, I don't think there's really anything that would piggyback onto it and do any better than what it's already doing.
Well, I mean, I guess total realm of possibility aside, anything you would want. Like I'll make a thing. I've said for the Holley, I would love to see someone build a CAN bus box that could control a 6L80.
Oh, I see.
It
Okay.
just throws what the 6L80 needs over CAN, and the 6L80 goes, "Oh, this is a stock computer. Everything's safe," and it just rifles gears.
Make it all nice and simple.
And then also what I've said is for a Terminator, sometimes people complain about the I/O, even though for most of the cars I've done, I've 100% used the I/O and not really wanted much more. But people complain about the I/O, and I've said to a bunch of my friends that it'd be nice for you to make a CAN bus box that just adds another 5 or 10 for a decent price. Because people that complain will only want like 3 or whatever more, so 10 extra, that would be awesome. So completely out of the realm of possibilities. If a stock computer could accept extra inputs, would you like to see that kind of thing?
I guess we'll go back to kind of what I was saying. The stuff that I work on, it's like it covers everything it needs. So I guess I'm horribly answering this, but
You don't. I mean, like, yeah, you're
yeah,
like, I don't need to, so I have no
I
suggestion.
don't need any of that stuff. Or I don't know, man. Just I guess a Gen 3, Gen 4, or Gen 3 computer that would control a newer transmission, like you were saying with the Terminator stuff. You can't put a 6L80E on an early 5.3.
Yeah, there's essentially nothing, and I've used that. We put it on my buddy Arnie's direct injected LTD, that zero gravity 2650, and it's light years behind of what a simple stock computer will do with a 6L80 because it was designed to drive it. No. Here's a good one. What's your pizza of choice?
Oh my gosh. Every pizza ever made. I am a pizza-aholic. Yeah, I don't have a specific one. If it's good and hot, I'm ready to get down on it.
That's a good separation from. Like I said, it's nice to have like on not car questions every now and then.
Yeah, I don't care if it's got vegetables or pineapples on it. I'm ready to eat it.
It's hard, it's tough to have bad pizza, as everybody says. All right. What's a good resource to read up on basic things like identifying what crimper jaws a guy should use or various pins and connectors?
So that stuff, I think if you find the pin that you're working on, a lot of websites that sell the pins will have the info on what it needs to be, to crimp it properly. Um, I don't know what website, I guess off the top of my head, like Mauser, they'll have the crimpers that go along with this pin, this pin, this pin, this pin. So if you do a little bit of digging through wherever you get the pins from, there's usually info on what crimpers work best for each pin.
There is. I like to use Bollinger a lot, even though some people don't, because I think it's easy. You can choose. You can basically choose on the side, like I have an LS3, and it'll show you all the connectors for an LS3. So that is nice. And then someone had posted links. Here's the AC Delco Complete Pigtail Guide. It's a crateengineeringdepot.com. I'm going to post the link in the chat real quick. This will tell you like every single AC Delco connector used. And then I've also bought stuff off of Waytech wiring. And then
I use Waytech.
there's another one here. I'm trying to look quick, without holding everybody up. There is another place. You can also join a Facebook group called like Wiring Identifier. You ever hear about that?
I'm on a couple of different like motorsport, wiring motorsport alliance. There's a couple of different wiring ones I'm on, and people ask questions, and put a picture of a pin, and if they're having a hard time finding it. So there's a lot of info on there. People are they have that a lot of people are looking for. So it's kind of nice to be able to read through that stuff also.
Yeah, this is. It's not this. I mean, yeah, you can find. I'm trying to find the group that I'm part of, but I'm part of too many groups. So, but there's literally the groups for, again, identifying. You can post. You can be like, this is what I have, and I need to fix, replace, find something to pin this, and people will help you.
Yeah, it's real helpful. So,
And
stuff on stock vehicles like old Chevy truck, the ignition switch on the steering column, like the pins in there. I've seen people try to locate, and it's just a simple part number you can get from Waytech even.
yeah, they're
But
like,
stuff people have already dug through and found what you need.
yeah.
So it's pretty helpful and quick to get info through those pages.
Yeah, luckily I've been learning a lot from stuff like that too, where I recently got into, I really appreciate what you do. And I used to just cut and butt connect and everything. And now, like, for anything I want to last, I do a non-insulated crimp and then I heat shrink it every time because it's so much smaller than one of those plastic junkers.
Right, and the wires are it's just like they're stuck in the shrink
Yeah,
tube if you
and
use it with some adhesive in it.
you can put like a ton of weight on them and they don't come apart, whereas the plastic ones you're like, this is decent, you pull and they come right out.
Right.
And then I've learned how to pin a lot. Holley sent me a ton of crimpers for like all the MetroPack and whatever else. I mean, there's only so many where it folds the wires in on each other like that.
Mhm.
They sent me all those, and they sent me de-pinning tools and everything. And ever since, like I said to you, like I screw up on the wiring and I need to move a pin, I would just cut everything and swap and red butt connect everything. And now I'm like, I can't believe I used to do that. It's so simple to use, like the green pick I have to pop the pin and move it. I'm like, why didn't
Yeah.
I
Yep.
do this? Like, this is so easy to use, and like a little bit of time spent learning that. I wish I had known it a long time ago. So,
I guess I got good at that stuff at the beginning because of all the seamless loom that I use. So I got to unpin, feed the wires through, and then repin it in a
yeah,
lot of cases. So
yeah,
all the different
you get,
types of connectors I have. Sorry,
no,
go
I'm
ahead.
terrible at bulldozing. So this is the entire radio show is a lesson in shut up and let people talk. So I'm always going to try to let you go, but yeah, it's something I wish someone had maybe shown me earlier. People used to make fun of my wiring, but I always said like, this might be ugly, but it works. The car always runs. My sensor data is good. I feel like a lot of people screw it up, but I did it. It wasn't presentable, but it was 100% functional. And now I've learned that doing all of that correctly, this is me growing as a person, obviously, because, when Sloppy started, I'm like, it works, whatever. And then I've learned from people, I like doing this because I've learned to be the fancy mechanics. But what I learned is doing it correctly is faster and easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I used to make a mess of it, and then adding something or subtracting something or rewiring was actually much harder.
And sometimes if you do something 2 years later next to that, you want it to not be the ugly thing you did 2 years ago. So you
Yeah.
try to make it the best you can when you're building it so it's good forever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Someone says Bollinger Motorsports have a Facebook page to identify connectors. Oh,
I
this
think
is
they're the only place I found some like the mate to a lot of connectors that you'll build your breakout harnesses from. They'll have the mate to the coolant temp sensor plug and things like that.
yeah. What I like about Bollinger also is a lot of these web pages, at least in my brain, are unattractive and hard to manage. Everyone goes use Mauser, and I'm like that is like it's like walking in. You see those movies where it's just archives of paperwork, and you're like, what do I do here? And people are like
Yeah,
elbowing you, and they're like, get out of the way, and you're like, I don't know where I am. That's what Mauser feels like to me. So Bollinger, at least, like I said, you can click LS3 and it shows the connectors. I will say I'd love to talk to the guy. I think it's suggested me to be friends with him on Facebook a bunch of times. Sometimes when you search for stuff, you can't get it. And if you have a part number and you paste it into search, it doesn't find it, which I think is a little ridiculous. But what I do like is when you click on a connector, it shows mating connectors.
yes, yeah.
So under a specific thing, it'll have like an about, and then next to it, it says like mating or like
Related
connectors.
parts.
Related parts, I believe, is exactly what it says. It'll show a kit, a pinning kit, a pigtail kit, a bare connector pit. So there's those things. If you're going to crimp it yourself, you can get the pin kit, whatever. And then I like that Bollinger sends you an extra pin in case you screw one up.
Yes, yep. I've
And
gotten
then
a lot of that.
if
3
you
pins
don't
on a 2-pin connector.
exactly, and then if you are scared of crimping and you don't have the tools, they'll sell the pigtail with wires in it.
Yes.
And then you can click, you're like, I need to extend what I have or something else. So you can buy the female and the male, they're all listed.
Yeah, they're the only place I've ever found that has that stuff.
So that's why I really like getting stuff from them, just because of I struggle with that when I see that stuff. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I want or how to find it or where do I get the male or the female. Like they list it all if you click on that one tab over. So that's what I
And it
like
has
about.
pictures. That helps quite a bit too with
Yeah,
pictures.
it's like
Like
this is the
unlike
connector.
Mauser, if you go to Mauser and you don't have a part number, your life is over. That whole website just is a mess.
That's what I mean. Like it looks like the empty box archive aisles that are 70 feet tall in a cartoon. You're like,
Yeah, don't show up without a part number.
what the hell do I get here? And no one will help you. Nobody. You're like,
I've
I
been on the phone
need.
with them a lot.
You're like, I need, and they're like, get out of here. If you don't know what you need, get out of here. It's not very friendly. All right. I don't even remember what the exact question was, but there we arrived at that cartoon archive scene. Oh, this is good. Leads right into this. What wiring specific tools do you use the most, and what tools would you suggest to anyone building DIY harness as their project?
So I use Kent Moore for all my GM connectors, and I have some Tool Aid crimpers also. I think they're kind of a low dollar thing, but they'll crimp onto all the seals and different size seal crimps that I need to do. But Kent Moore is what I use for the most part, and that's like a GM tool for all their MetroPack stuff. I love that thing. I've bought multiple sets of the exact same thing. When they wear out, I have a couple just ready to go.
And I believe
Because
that's
I'm crimping, 100 crimps a day probably by hand. So they definitely get worn out.
do you have calluses from just handling a crimp tool all day?
My forearms are good.
Someone, Frank Reyes is always in my live chats, and he always patiently asks stuff 18 times in a row. And so we'll address him next before we go to the preak. He goes, yellow Raychem D25 or white D25, and why? The only difference I see from my harnesses is the yellow one is glossier.
I don't know. What is he referring to?
I guess he means for like Raychem for like shrink wrap, but I don't think you use that in your stuff.
I use all it's all black, just pretty basic. Yeah, nothing a lot of people use clear and they'll try to shrink a label under it or things like that. And I think that quality kind of is marginal, wherever you get it from. But I always use black.
Raychem is what I've seen on like my friends that do the race car wiring stuff. It's like the angled boot that you can whatever, and it has a
Oh,
ring
okay.
for you to put on like a Canon plug and stuff like that. So I think that's what he's at. Like I
Right.
said,
Okay.
like a rye wire harness has all the fancy Canon plugs and stuff you essentially don't need, but it looks cool. Because I've even asked my buddy Devin, I'm like, where do you get, is it amp seal or a DT barrel plug? I'm like, I just want to do that. And he's like, don't. He's like, don't do it. That's his professional opinion. He's like, don't even do it, because for an average person, it's just going to be worse. It's going to be more of a headache, It's not worth it unless, and then he even says, like, he's like, just get a grommet and put your wires through it. You don't
I
need it to
totally
just,
agree with that.
unless it's a race car and you're yanking the motor between rounds 3 times a day, you don't need that much separation on your harness or possible points of failure for a daily driver. There's no sense in it. Yeah, he says it's heat shrink tubing for covering wires. Yeah, it's a specialty heat shrink tubing. Like I said, it comes in 90s and fits over like the airplane, or
The Canon plugs.
Cannon plugs is what I always call them. It's essentially just a big, people don't know what it is. It's
Right.
like a big twist lock pins, like a DT, but a Cannon plug, a circle.
Right. I know what you're talking about.
People call it
Yeah.
mil spec or, whatever. I always laugh about that when people say mil spec. Oh, it's mil spec. Anybody that's been in the military is like, mil spec's a joke. Mil spec is below anybody's standards, and I'm sorry if people feel offended. Most of them are going to laugh, but I have no military experience. I'm just laughing from what I know people laughing about. All right, we got another one. Andy is the man. He did my harness 5 years ago, and it still works great. My question would be, can you run E85 on a stock LS1 ECU without a content sensor and still get the benefits of E85? Thanks, Matt and Andy. You guys have helped a ton. Well, you go ahead. That's an easy answer.
Yeah, that's, if your tuner's good, you can definitely run it straight and tune for it. Yeah. Going back and forth wouldn't be as easy unless you know.
Exactly the same. Obviously, if it's tuned on straight E or race gas or some sort of strange like Q or something like that, that's some wild oxygenated nail polish remover nitro garbage, sure. But if you need what I say flex, if you need to be able to swing back and forth, it becomes more difficult. But I did an entire video on adding flex fuel because I wanted to learn how to do it, and nobody could give me a straight answer. And I was like, well, that's my classic thing is, if you guys can't answer me, it's because you have no idea also. So I dove into that. So I had a bunch of people help me, like Chris Ortiz and Cesar Enriquez, and we were able to find like a Tahoe OS and whatever else, and we made 4L80E flex fuel enabled P01 and P59 operating systems that could do speed density depending on a lot of things, and I gave all that out. And you can use them with a flex sensor, but what I'll say is a P01 is really slow, so you can't add E85 and make a pass at the racetrack. It's going to blow up. You have to drive it for a couple minutes, but it'll get acclimated. And if you have short O2 sensor, short trim, it'll add enough as you drive out of the gas station to get you going, and the content takes forever to go up. P59, the content will come up faster, and there is a spark and fuel table where you can change power enrichment and some other wide open fueling, add some spark, minimal things. So it's possible, but I think like you answered it well. I think he was asking, can you tune on E85, which is
absolutely
any fuel you can set up, but if you want to be able to swing back and forth, the P01 is slow, but depending on what you know in your head and what someone set up, it's possible, but it's not ideal. A P59 is much faster. Obviously, E38 has it built in, and it's much faster. It'll show content right away.
Yeah, sometimes it'll pick up and give you a poor stoic value, even on just unleaded. Yeah, it'll pick up. It's like E10 or whatever when you get unleaded fuel,
Hmm.
and it'll show much more than that and throw everything off.
Yeah, what I've found, and a lot of people have found running an ethanol sensor, is if it's gets aerated at all, it spazzes. It shows 0 or 100, and it'll just blip the whole car out. That's why I wish I keep asking Holley to do like some BS things, and I harp on them about certain things. And I wish you could slow down the content sensor to a degree, because it is, even with like they have a bar for smoothing out sensors like refresh rate. Even with that pinned, if you have like a tiny air bubble, it's like 0 or 100. It goes low air, like it's lightning quick. It's like low, and it changes the, because the way I have it set up and the way even they recommend is it's a fuel multiplier. So it's adding 38%, say, and it goes 0%. Like it just yanks
Right.
40% of fuel out the minute it goes low air. And a lot of people know that's bad. Yanking 40%
Yes.
of fuel out while you're wide open, and the fuel gets a little bit of bubble in the return line or whatever. So yeah, there's all that. And there is, I've read, and you probably know, but I want to add, there is virtual flex. Did you
They
ever
go
hear
off the
that?
fuel trims.
It looks
Yes.
at the fuel trims and estimates an E85 value, and no one should ever. People might not know about that, but that is an awful, awful. A bunch of stock cars have that, and it blew my mind when I read about it. I'm like, what's virtual flex? And what it
Yeah,
does,
that's
guys, if the car is taking 30% extra fuel trim, it estimates that it's E25. It's guessing,
yeah, it's terrible.
and it
Terrible. I
could
can't believe it does that. But I
it
guess
could
in a stock form, it's probably okay because there's not a lot of variables there. But if you swap a vehicle and you got a shitty fuel pump, and the fuel trims are all over the place, it's gonna affect it
yeah.
worse than in a stock vehicle, I guess.
So that's
But yeah, that's
funny.
an odd thing to do.
Oh, Calvin Nelson is here. Andy is the best.
Oh, good.
Thanks for working with us. Love your willingness to try new things. That's what, if people don't know, Andy, I sent him an entire gold box and wiring, and he did his own wiring version of it. And I was like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this. All of my projects I already have sorted, they're all running. And then my Mustang that's taken me forever to get done, I already have a complete Holley setup for it. So I knew that Calvin would be able to use it immediately. So I'm like, I'm just handing it to him. And then he was able to use it immediately. So that's why Calvin is here.
Yeah, that worked out good. He had a couple of suggestions for me to change on it also, so that kind of helped me too.
He always has good constructive criticism. Absolutely. He'll never tell you something's dumb without telling you why it's dumb or how to make it not dumb.
That's perfect.
That's what I appreciate
Everybody needs a
most.
friend like that.
Yep. He'll be like, don't do that, and this is why. And you're like, okay, Calvin's saying it, so I should probably at least take it into consideration, part of it. This guy says, what gauge wire do you use on PCM? Which I guess he means for the pin on a stock computer, and I guess that would depend on the computer itself. And then it says, I look for thicker wire myself, better on the fuel pump and ignition coils.
So when I'm building a brand new harness, it doesn't matter what it's for. Any of the computers, Gen 3, Gen 4 stuff, I always use 18 gauge for all the sensors and everything. It's a little bigger than what the Gen 4 stuff would have originally. I think it's 20 or 22
It's
gauge.
very thin.
Yeah, so I always use 18 gauge on everything. And then I feed my fuse box with an 8 gauge, and then you have a 10 gauge to the fuel pump.
I guess that's what he's asking is like, do you do a fuel pump? Actually, a stock computer has no fuel pump circuit. It goes into the stock fuse panel and that goes out. So people might not know about your harness. It already has fuel pump circuit built in, and it has appropriate size wiring and everything else. So he might be asking like, do you run a 20 gauge wire to the fuel pump? And that's no.
No.
Because like
Yeah,
he's
even the
like,
signal wire would be an 18 gauge
yeah, you don't
from
use
the ECU
anything,
to the relay.
nothing smaller than 18.
No.
Yeah, so that was interesting because I guess he's like, what I like to see is a thicker wire for some things. That's what anybody wants to see. Not to be a jerk, but that's who I am sometimes. Oh, this guy I just had in the live chat. E85 stuff is coming up. Is there any way to adjust our fuel to E85? And maybe he can elaborate on that. But like or what I would do is just add fuel. Roughly, it's 40% more fuel, and you would just toss it in and go from there. Not many people run straight E on a stock ECU, in my opinion.
All my hands-on stuff locally is just unleaded. Also, there's no ethanol fuel for like I don't know, 100 miles maybe to the station, or not even a station. I think you can order it in barrels to you, but it's not popular where I'm at. It's not in any pumps anywhere, so I don't have a lot of time with it.
And then people used to ask me endlessly, why do I not have stuff on ethanol? And the same answer was, it is nowhere present. I would have to buy drums of it, and it's not easy for me to use, and I have see no benefit trying to get it and everything else. It's complicated, blah, blah, blah. But now there's a gas station down the street on my way home, on my way out of home. It's there. So it's dumb for me not to use it. And I have seen all of the benefits of it, especially being $1 or so cheaper than regular and definitely premium most of the time. Where was this I wanted to ask? Someone else threw something down. Someone says, can a flex fuel read methanol content in a gasoline methanol mix? Here in Puerto Rico, a lot of guys are mixing gas with methanol. And I'll say, I haven't gotten to test this 100%, but I have taken like a 50% or straight pump gas cars and dumped in M1 for like a methanol injection setup and have seen my content go up. But I haven't apples to apples dumped in, like, I had 5 gallons of pump, like 10% ethanol roughly, and dumped in 5 gallons of M1, and then read the content that went up and made sure that my closed loop trims were still close, meaning that all of those laws for ethanol are the same for methanol. But I would say it's probably pretty close. It's I've seen it go up and I had no problems doing it, and I've done it like 3 times, but I don't have the science behind it to give you.
I've never done anything like that over here either.
I just messed
Man,
around.
like I said, I just work on a lot of stock or mild things, so a lot of these questions are beyond what I normally do.
Yeah, they're like fuels and tuning specific, and yeah.
Yeah,
So I'll do my best to answer that, but yeah.
I
Well,
hate
he
to be up
says.
here just like I don't know what I'm talking about, but I work on a certain thing, and it's just very busy. So it's kind of like a little narrow path here.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to, like, people say, does nitro work? And absolutely, mixing nitro in. Recently, PFI Speed did an all motor car on pump or something, and it made like 300. And they started turning it up on nitro mix, and I think they got close to 50, 60% before they were out of pump or injector or something. And they made 150 extra horsepower on like a 2-liter K series. And I was like, that's how crazy nitro is. They made 150 extra horsepower, and he said he's like, with enough pump and whatever else they needed, he's like 500 isn't out of the stretch from how much it was gaining. And I'm like, that's dumb. Like 200 extra to the tire because of a nitro mix instead of, I think it was running straight alcohol and it made 300, but that's because they were going to do nitro mix. But I was like blown away that such a small engine could pick up 200 horsepower, almost 200% more power. I mean, that's what he's speculating, but I don't have any reason to discount what that guy in particular, Brent, says about that. I don't think he would just BS a number, because I don't think he ever has. Here we go. A Gen 3 factory ECM drive-by-wire question. They have a VS Racing 7875 on a 6.0. They bought a TBSS new body style intake, and they want to go to a larger 90 millimeter throttle body or later. Is there any way to make an adapter harness work, or am I stuck buying an X-Link?
So this is something that I have done and I do. The LS2 throttle body can work with what you have. I build a wiring adapter, and you got to use a a plastic tack module, the 99 to '02 style tack module. And you can make it all work with stock GM parts with no adapter, X-Link or nothing like that. And it works good. And that's a 90 millimeter floor bolt that'll work on your intake.
And you make that box or whatever?
Yeah, just a wire. It's just a wiring adapter to go from the 8-pin throttle body to the 6-pin.
And is there any like ECU changes that have to be done or no?
Direct plug-in, yeah.
Oh wow, okay, that'll make
It's
a
just
lot
a
of people.
perfect, yeah, it's just a perfect match of parts.
Because
No tuning.
I've heard of that X-Link. I had never known about it until I tuned something to one day and they talked about it. And I was like, what is this? And then they were like, oh, it's the 8-pin to whatever. And I'm like, oh. And then it would throw codes and limp and do, and I'm like, this is garbage. And then he said it was like $300. I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, it's $300 to limp your truck all the time? Like, oh man, this is ugly.
If you look through my LSX page, there's a video of me taking the 78 millimeter throttle body off and plugging in the 90 millimeter, and it all works with the same pedal, same tune, just directly plugs in and will work. So all the info is there, all the part numbers, everything you need for the parts.
Oh, here, someone actually says, I've used methanol with a GM Flex sensor and it reads fine. So that backs up like, mostly my hobnob test of I've done a small amount, but nothing like the data I usually get on something I try to give people. And then this is funny too. He got Shocker here in my chat. He goes, mil spec is whoever won the cheapest bid. 15 years of aviation mechanics and making stuff fly. So that's what, again, like the military people are backing me up. Like, it's not military. Like when someone sells a knife and they're like mil spec, and military guys are like, it's like the cheapest thing the military can buy. It doesn't mean that it's not a high standard. It's below civilian standard because there's no health or whatever safety for us. They always joke about that. All you have to do is change the scaling. Yeah, you can change like the Stoich and some other stuff to change the fuel scaling. I think you can change Stoich to like 935 and then it's on E85 at that point. You can do
everything else will follow.
There's a bunch of stuff you can do. You can just slam 35% in most of the fuel tables. Stoich is an easy way to do it because I think that's global. It does start up and everything then. It's much easier. That's a good point. I forgot to say you can just biff the Stoich table. But then people might be confused because their PE shows like a 750 air fuel.
That one's kind of difficult for people that are still tuning with an air to fuel ratio instead of lambda.
So similarly, like I said, you can just tune it for like whatever you're getting out of your pump and all the values are normal and that's fine. Or you can do that too. So yeah, the X-Link one, we can get rid of that. That was a good one because I've heard of people having that issue and just limping their cars because of this $300 box and they're not happy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I have one of those on I have a Suburban with a 6.2. It's a Gen 3 engine that's, long story. Anyway, it's a P59 with the 90 millimeter throttle body. So it's all stock GM parts and works great.
That's nice to know you have that. I didn't know you had an X-Link substitute, honestly.
It's probably more expensive than the X-Link, but it's definitely more reliable and it's parts store parts. So nothing special or odd there.
This says, can you explain the types of wiring loom to use and when and where in the loom to use them? Thanks.
So I always use TechFlex is the brand I use. And I use a couple of different sizes. If you're going to use this stuff and loom things up, you got to be like 5 steps ahead of yourself or you're going to forget something or something's not going to turn out right. Because if it branches off, I mean, you got to think about all that stuff before you start sliding the loom over.
I guess that's my worst admission is I don't have foresight in anything other than like if I'm building a car, I can buy 95% of the parts out of my head. But everything else, I am like the worst chess player ever. I can't see a step in front of me. So when I'm wiring, it's difficult for me most of the time. That's why I really like those DT connectors and some other stuff, because I can make it semi presentable and still have modular connectivity. But I guess he would mean like, do you use like the foil stuff by the crank position sensor because the headers and like anything like that? Would you choose to use different heat shrink or different loom in other areas or whatever?
So on the like you said, the crank route something differently, or you like you said had heat shrink or heat resistant stuff somewhere other than the normal, then that's all stuff we can deal with. But DEI, I think, is the heat shield that I would use.
Yeah, they're probably the most well known, so it's good to know that you think it's not garbage also.
Oh no, it's good stuff. Yeah.
And then, man, I just got triggered for a question, but now it's gone. It's gone already. So maybe I'll 15 minutes later I'll think about it. Oh, they said Andy's dropping out. Yeah, I'm sorry guys. I did that accidentally.
Oh,
I accidentally cut him out. So what was he? Oh, it was just about the wiring stuff, I believe. Audio in and out here. Yeah, guys, I did that. I was trying to mute myself to keep quiet, and I clicked mute my audio from my desktop, and I didn't realize that was also you. But now I realize how stupid I am. But you were saying the only thing you essentially use is like DEI, and then also you said you talk to a customer, and that essentially is you normally you wire it all the same unless someone has specific needs. So I'll paraphrase.
yeah. Yeah, basically, if they just want to put a little extra protection with the heat shield on certain sensors for certain reasons, or if they have turbocharged, front-mounted O2 sensors and things like that. So everything's custom. Just if I'm building something for you, we're on the phone nonstop and make sure it's exactly what you need and want, and will work best for you.
I would say
So
the big thing is Andy's stuff is the best laid out. Not to kiss ass, but your stuff is the best laid out I've ever used because I like what you do. You do like a tree branch. You have the trunk, and then what I don't like is a lot of harnesses. They come across the injector, and then out of nowhere, the coil pack
the
connector.
coils, yeah.
So, and a lot of cars, like you go to connect it, and then you have to stretch the injectors for whatever reason, rails or an LSA blower or whatever, and looming it like that is it leaves a lot to be desired for so many complicated setups. And the way Andy does it is, there's the trunk, and then like the map sensor is 30 inches and the coil connector is 30 inches, and then not specific, I might be wrong on the dimensions, but like you have completely separate TPS, you have completely separate IAC, and you just run them together, but you don't have anything where you have 3 inches on each one, and you're stretching and pulling connectors to get there, because you have slightly different fuel rail or throttle or whatever.
Oh yeah, exactly. So everything that I send out, I'm assuming you're going to have a truck intake or a car intake later. So the map sensor's long enough to do both. And like you said, with the coils, they're separate. A lot of guys want to mount them down lower or on the firewall or inside the car, or that stuff's all doable. You don't got to cut nothing apart to get there.
Yeah, your complete
Alternator
base
wiring.
harness is easy to do that. People may not be realizing that, but people are asking about foresight and stuff like that. You already think of that. And then the other neat thing I would say is for a while, like I specified a certain harness. And I know when I would direct people to you, they would be like, I want the don't BS me. They didn't know what they wanted, so they're like, give me Matt's harness. Because I would
Right,
tell
right.
you, I'm like, I don't need MAF, I don't need O2s, I only want this, or sometimes I got front only, or and like this, like Matt's harness. So they go, hey, I want Matt's harness, so you know exactly what to build. Because we go over in the show a lot. Sometimes customers, not always a bad thing, don't know what they want. They don't know.
Yeah, they don't know all the technical things. Like when you did the 202 wires into one sensor,
Yes.
that was a big thing. I want the 102 sensor, wire them together. And a lot of people just said that, and I'm asking them questions, and they don't know. They don't know why a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So we can kind of get into that with them, and make sure it's exactly what they need.
Yeah, exactly. And then here's a good one. And I'm going to step out for a second while you answer it, just so you know. I go running off. You can keep talking. You don't have to be like, what happened? How do you organize a wiring project and where do you start?
Oh man. So if it's something like a rebuild, I always start with just stripping all the tape and loom off. Everything comes off. I have a couple of pictures and videos back on my Facebook page, but all the wires are completely separated, and I kind of get a look at everything that way. There's a lot of stuff that gets cut, like in wrecking yards or whatever. So or people just get used secondhand, and they just cut the tranny plug off, or whatever. So I can see all that stuff, make sure that it's got everything it needs, or I can get what it needs. So I'll start that way. I have an engine on a stand, just a mock-up engine. Everything get built on the engine. So if you need to mount the computer on the driver's inner fender, build it on the engine, direct it all over. So I get everything cut to length, pin everything on, loom it all up, and kind of just go from there. But yeah, I just start by dismantling the whole thing and making sure that it's all usable stuff.
I would say like that's one of my biggest questions for the race car guys that I know is I know they write down everything ahead of time because like I said again, like for application specific, you don't ever have to do that, but you want to add in like relays like fans or oh, that brings me to well, if you can remember, I'm too squirrel to remember this, but someone asked about your fan harness.
Oh,
So
okay.
we'll go over that, but I like I said, I lack the foresight, so something like that really interests me. Like, but I know they write down everything and wire extra ahead of time, and that's similar to every now and then I do IT work, and every now and then I do just raw cable pulling, and we'll pull 15 at a shot. And if someone requests 30, you pull 45 usually, because you know they're gonna want 10 more, and then they're gonna want 3 more, and you're just killing yourself to pull it. So you always pull extra. But
Right.
I'd be awful at laying a car out. I would need significant help in ground up. That's why I like buying harnesses and just throwing them at the car and then I'm
All
done.
the thought work's already done. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm awful at it. So, and I know that's one of my biggest downfalls. All right, then the fan harness.
So those I always build them separate. I never wire them into my little engine fuse block. So they get their own power source, they get their own fuses, and everything's completely separate. So you're not trying to feed off of all the same stuff the engine's feeding off of.
Yeah, I'm
But they
trying
still are operated by the computer.
trying to find where he asked. Maybe he could ask again. But yeah, he might mean like, is there anything special about it? And it's just its own standalone, technically, with 2 ground wires.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's something I'll build them, with the 3 relays. So you got dual fans at low speed, dual fans at high speed, or 1 relay for each. So you got 1 control here and 1 control there. Or go ahead.
Oh, that's a good question. I've always seen that and heard that, and I know what that is, but how do the 3 relays split the voltage, or how does that work?
Yep. So you get 6 volts to each fan through 1 relay. It splits the voltage, and then the other 2 relays are 12 volts each to the fans for high speed.
So is that a 6-volt relay and it like internally knocks the voltage down, or how does it split?
I'm not sure exactly how it technically works, but that's the idea behind it. That's the same way GM does it in all their controllers also.
Yeah, I've seen like they have the whole conglomerate, but I always wondered from like an electrical standpoint, how does that work? Like, is there a giant resistor in there that knocks it down, or is somehow the way it's wired, it knocks
It's
half the
just the way it
voltage out?
wired, because they're all just normal 12-volt relays. One of them needs to be a 5-pin, so it can turn off when the others turn on. But yeah, I do those. Like a lot of people want me to build them, but I mean, I'll send you all the diagrams I use also if you want to build it yourself.
I want to
I'm not
stare
real.
at it and be like, how does this work? I need to
I'm
watch
gonna
it.
message a picture right now.
I'm gonna watch a
It's
YouTube video on how the three relays work. Maybe someone can feed me one.
it's very there's a lot of stuff happening, but you'll be able to look at it and maybe get an idea.
I'm sure that's why I'm asking, is because I have no idea how it functions. So here's a good one. It says, I just started de-pinning red and blue connectors, and I'd love to hear any tips or suggestions for re-looming and tucking for a cleaner look.
Kind of what I just said a second ago. Just strip everything so it's not connected to like all those the big groups of ground wires and things. I always cut that out of the way because that kind of like you just feel like you're stuck. You can't move things out of the way. So just cut all that stuff out of there and put it on the engine how you want it, routed, kind of tape it up a little bit and cut it all to length and just do it a little bit at a time. I wouldn't try to do it as a whole. Do one sensor at a time. You know, you can get like those Velcro zip ties I've seen you use before and just kind of get it routed where you want.
Oh, that's a huge thing for the data center because we're always changing stuff. We're moving, updating, whatever. So I hate, it's a pet peeve of mine, honestly, when I see people doing wiring and there's zip ties pulled tight as hell on stuff. And I'm like, it tweaks me out because I'm like, you should never have a zip tie that's crushing the jacket on copper wiring. Why is it crushing the jacket? That's dumb. Stop. It's gonna chafe and it's gonna eventually have an issue. And I hate when I see like 1,000 cables pulled and then the thing is like a hose clamp, like it's gonna ruin itself. But we do Velcro tape on everything, and then we even color coordinate. So majority of our stuff is yellow and green and orange, and then we have green Velcro tape. It matches, it color coordinates. You can almost not tell how it's organized, but you need the let's make up a word, modularity. You need that kind of flexibility to do that in my world. But if other people can zip tie the hell out of their stuff and get away with it, but it irks me. Like I'm sure you see stuff where people do something and you're like, it's gonna rip the jacket and whatever else, and like when people put heater hoses or other stuff right against something where it's gonna rub and it's gonna chafe the hoses apart, and you're like, it's gonna do it. But yeah,
I see a lot of guys will wrap just a handful of wires with electrical tape, and then they'll have to add something to it. So they'll put more tape, and they'll add something to it and more
lay
tape.
the
So
wire and keep taping. Yeah,
you got like 4 or 5 different. You can't just do one quick
I'm
cut
guilty.
with a
I'm guilty.
yeah.
Because
Oh,
I'm the guy that forgets to think ahead of time, and I'll do like, just add one, yeah. Oh yeah, someone else. It just came up in my head. Someone asked about what do you think about concentric and twisted wiring?
it looks awesome. I think it takes a lot of time, and I guess it kind of depends on what you're working on. Um, I don't know. I see a lot of guys are getting more into that. I don't know how well it would work with what I try to do.
Yeah, I'm up and down about it. I don't know enough about it. I know in the IT world it helps with interference because you can have so many sensitive devices on top of each other, and then other stuff we just have on top of each other. Like it's kind of like a give and take. But I can understand how you want it twisted as much as possible. I have seen when we do patch panels and whatnot, you get a better quality connection if you measure the actual throughput by taking the twist like a cat 5 cat 6 whatever cable ethernet. If you when you go to punch it down, if you come out of the jacket and leave the twist like all the way up to the punch panel instead of stripping it back 3 inches and then punching it, you do get more throughput out of it instead of opening the wires at the ends even 3 inches. So there is truth to that, but that's in like the very sensitive IT world. But I can understand how it makes a parallel to data. But if it's like you said, if it's a cruiser or a stock whatever, twisting all that wiring and making it pretty might make no difference for 99% of people.
Right.
I'd love to
Yeah, like
see. Oh, go.
when you're working on automotive electrical, one of the biggest things to do is hide it anyway. So what you have to see, you try to make nice. But for the most part, if you got a bundle that big, it's going to be somewhere hidden anyway. So it might be just kind of a waste of time.
Someone asked, "Do you like Tessa style tape?" Which we went over earlier, but you say no tape ever, none.
Yeah, I'm not a big tape guy, but if I have to use any kind of tape, that it would be a better quality fabric tape like that.
That's what my wife always laughs because like whenever I do something. We did a VR6 12 valve swap in her Mark II. And anytime we did something, I'm like, Tessa. And I'm like wrapping something. I'm like, Tessa tape, Tessa. And I said it to her like 1,000 times. I'd use the word grody or Tessa tape like 7 times a minute. And she's just like, you and your effing Tessa tape. Like, I'm like, I love it. It looks professional, even though I'm not. It's like it's like having a fake face or a good suit to put on, even though you're a disgusting person and everyone thinks you're important. That's how I
When I see that
feel.
stuff all over a harness, I from stuff I've ripped apart in the past, I automatically think it's hiding something. When I see
Ah,
just gobs of tape, I'm like, oh, it's hiding something. And usually, when somebody sends me something like that, it was hiding something.
that's
Butt
that.
connectors that weren't done properly, or stuff that gets cut off and just taped over. So usually, a lot of tape on a harness is a good indicator if it's hiding something.
So that's where your disdain stems from tape. Is that someone ruined something and then just covered it?
With beautiful tape, yeah.
Well, ironically, I most of my best wiring and like end-to-end terminals and clean and whatever and rubber booted, I've Tessa taped. I'd like it. I don't know why. Oh, he's Rambo Racing guy I know named John. He says Tessa tape is vag life. So it's German and Volkswagen obviously. And then yeah, so people ask about concentric, and you were like, I don't really do it. You don't see the benefit for what you do. So that's the big thing. Uh, where was another one? Oh. So this one is a completely separate note. If you've not gotten to mess with some of the professional entertainment based connectors like Nutrix, PowerCon, or EtherCon, I've never heard of this. I need to look at this up now. I don't know if it would be applicable for what you get up to, but you might find it useful. PowerCon and EtherCon. I'm going to look this up right now. He
I'm
says
looking to.
I guess this guy does home theater stuff. Another guy wrote in the comments when I was talking about zip ties being stupid and awful. He does like home theater and I think he said high end theater and whatever, presenting and projectors. And he's like, yeah, nobody zip ties the hell out of stuff with what I do. EtherCon Nutric. I'm looking this up. Oh,
I'm looking at the PowerCon stuff.
it looks like it's strain relieved connectors, built in strain relief. Like it has a big steel shielded strain relief. Like
I
heat
don't know how.
wrap on homemade hot sides. I agree. That's 100% clear line in the sand. When people heat wrap a hot side, it's because it's disgusting underneath. Heat all heat wrap
Well, I'm
does
guilty of
all heat
that.
wrap does is trap water and oil and just rot the hot side underneath, in my opinion. And if
It's the
you
electrical tape in the wiring
that's
world.
what he just said.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
hilarious.
That's funny you said that because I've used tons of heat wrap on hot piping.
Yeah, I'm always like, if your hot side is up and around and in your way where you need to do that, your hot side shouldn't be like that. That's me being a jerk, maybe, but that's what I always say. I'm working on a junk third gen Firebird, and it has what looks like tar in the bulkhead connector. Is there a chemical that will break that down without hurting the wires? I bet someone RTV'd it because they were getting moisture in it.
Some of those stock bulkheads are like that. They just have all that goo in there.
They're filled.
Um, it's like you almost have to pressure wash it with the chemical. You can't probably just pour it or soak it.
Oh, but I mean, I guess he's asking like anything, like what would you recommend at least try?
Maybe some acetone. That stuff will break down nearly anything. If I got something like that to try to fix, I would try to find the terminals that fit that
And just
connector
cut it
and
off.
just cut everything off. Yeah, and then clean the plastic part of the connector, and then reuse that with new terminals.
Someone asked an interesting one. What are the options for tuning a stock GM computer? That's a pretty good question.
To like have me help them remotely, kind of thing.
I guess both, or every suggestion you can make.
I still use HP tuners. I know a lot of guys are hating on it a lot, but I know it well enough to like it, I guess. But that's pretty much the EFI Live and HP tuners, the two big ones for stock computers. So if I was to help remotely, you'd have to have. I use HP tuners, so I'd want you to use HP tuners. That's kind of the only option, really.
Yeah, I guess that's what they're asking is what are the options? And those are the only two I know of that are have a broad usage is HP tuners and EFI Live. And I really have not. I think it's whenever you start, whatever your friends and whoever's helping you learn has, because obviously you don't want to offshoot. Like if all your friends have Holley, you usually don't want to buy a Haltech in case there's an issue. You all can kind of share knowledge or issues, or if you have what you think is a hardware problem, you can borrow somebody's hardware. It's all interchangeable. That's why like Drag Week is almost all Holley cars because everybody has it, everybody can use it, you know. And I think I've heard from people that do it. There's like a Holley tent at most of the tracks, and they try to keep your Holley car going. Obviously, not to point any fingers at them at all, but it looks good for them to help and keep their cars going, even if there is an issue. But yeah, that's I would say there's those two. I've heard of stuff like LS Edit, LT1 Edit, LS1 Edit. A guy named I'm terrible with names, but he's working on. He has that Android program that's called PCM Hammer. He does
Oh
stuff
yeah,
like that. He's trying to open source edit that stuff, and that's awesome. I would never have the time or energy to get into that, but it's cool. It's like a pet project of his. There's some, but the huge ones are HP Tuners and EFI Live. But I think those companies are going to be in trouble soon because of the EPA overstep. They really have to
yes.
watch it. Oh man. So do you guys have any other questions? I got my most important ones out of the way. I don't want to ask any other. Oh, this guy says WD-40 will dissolve tar. This guy says use diesel fuel. This guy says
Yeah, I good. Both good ideas. Yeah.
this guy just says tar just sucks. Just redo it. Like you said, you would just get the connector and redo it. Same thing. Like if it didn't have tar stock and someone did that, it's probably an underlying issue anyway, and you should probably just change the connector completely or replace the end. Or oh, he says I think this Joe, it's like Joe Exotic spelled with like a Q, but he says it's great for replacing XLR speakers and power and some other stuff. But from what I see, it's mostly Ethernet shielded and some other stuff. But yeah, I don't know if you would ever use that in motorsport.
Yeah, it doesn't look like anything automotive related in there.
So my heat wrap on my downpipe and turbo headers isn't any good. Well, I mean, if you have underhood temperature issues, it's probably because you have 60 foot of underhood hot side piping, which is like keeps me up at night when I see it. Uh, there was a guy that posted on Sloppy the other day. He had like, it's like he planned to use every available empty space with hot side piping. And that just it makes me nuts because I know like down and forward truck irons that are never in the way. No, it doesn't give you any problems. No specialty plug wires, doesn't burn anything. Will make 1500 horsepower, and people are making like 650 with up and overs with 180s on them, and going into like a big Medusa into a top mounted T6 in front of their rad and a 6-inch downpipe, and they're like, my car overheats. I have no clue why. And I'm
Creating
like,
more problems than they had to start with. Yeah.
I burn my arms all the time. Yeah. Yeah. Not sure what's going on there. This is a good question, but it says, do you think Holley will offer anything like HP tuners for stock computers in the future? I would say absolutely not. They have zero interest in doing that. And by staying away from flashing stock computers, you alleviate yourself from the entire EPA, whatever else. You're selling an aftermarket computer that has no emissions control, so it's generally stated that they're not. I mean, there's EFI Live and HP tuners are huge. Why would you try to compete with them? Blah blah blah. They already have a 4 major ECU lineup that works incredible, and they're making millions of dollars a day. They have no interest in R&Ding that. That's my answer. What's your answer?
I think that was a great way to say it. Yeah. Yeah, they got their own thing going on that's completely separate from anything that involves the law with all the EPA stuff. And there's already plenty of stuff out there that's light years ahead of them in the stock computer world.
I feel like essentially that's like asking it's maybe a hard line to draw here, but it's like asking a plumber if they'll do electric when they make so much money and have no problem doing plumbing. Like, you should do electric, and he's like, I gotta buy certs, insurance, train people, accept liability, blah blah blah. They're like, nope, nope, no thanks.
Yeah, they can do it, but it just doesn't make any sense to do it.
Oh, here's a good one. I like this right away. The last question. This is a great question. Uh, what's your bucket list car you guys would like to swap?
Oh man, I'm totally a muscle car guy, so I guess I want to try to find a 68 Chevelle. It's basic. A million people have them. A million people have swapped them, but I still want one because I like them.
So that would be
So
like your dream.
that's my dream thing right there. So nothing exotic or cool or out of the ordinary. I'm still just a plain old muscle car guy.
And then would you just do like, is there any particular setup you would like to see in that, or something you've never done, or what?
Both actually. I'm pretty sure I just sold the engine out of my car, the LSA. I'm gonna put an LT4 in it.
Oh man, sick.
So I'm getting more into that stuff.
Are you going to do the like what does that have? A 10 speed? No.
So the newer ones, yeah.
And
I
would
don't know
you
if the LT4s did, but the newer Gen 5 platform would come with
Yeah,
something
would
like
you
that.
do the auto or would you do something else?
My car has a TR6060 in it now,
Oh,
so I'm just gonna leave that.
incredible trans.
Yeah.
That's what I've driven a lot of cars in the dyno, obviously. And when I get in a car and it feels like a box truck, I'm like, this is a T56.
Yeah, I'm not a big T56 fan, but those TR6060s with a good shifter in them are awesome.
Life changing. I try to tell people that if they're gonna spend money, don't even buy a T56. Even a good one, in my opinion, just feels like a clunky old World War II rifle. It feels awful.
Yeah, if you drive around an old F-body Camaro, those things are just they're all worn out. They all have issues. No matter how low of miles it is, it's like this thing is totally worn out.
And a 6060, you can put tons of power through, no issues. It shifts like butter. Like, that's what I started doing a bunch of cars maybe 2 years ago, and I get in and I drive, and I'm like, what trans is in this? Because it's like butter, and it was mostly a CD09 and some TR6060. Because obviously a TR6060 is money, but it's a great transmission. And now I get it, like I have this G35 with the twin disc and the blower and everything, and you can barely touch the clutch and rifle off gears, and I never have a problem. I've never missed a gear in the car. Like, it shifts beautiful, everything else. So spending, I think, that extra money on, I don't think, my buddy George, we're gonna put his car in the dyno tomorrow. He has a T56 Magnum, a fairly expensive high end Magnum, and I have to drive that again and think it may be totally redone to the point where it's not at all like a T56, but
I'm pretty sure they're kind of a copy of the TR6060, but they have a slip joint
I believe so
for the
too.
drive shaft. Yeah.
Instead of the bolt yoke, the rubber cushing or whatever.
Yeah, I still have the coupler there. I just put a 1350 joint on the back with no rubber grommet
Does it have a slip somewhere then?
in the drive shaft.
in the center of it, like an off-roader.
like a four-wheel drive. Yeah.
That's cool. That's what I should have done with my buddy Arnie's car, but I learned. So I guess what would I? That's a tough question for me. Like, what would my bucket list be? It's a lot of cars. It's another car every day. I drive down the road and I'm like, man, it'd be cool to do that. But I have a few that I have talked about a lot of times and I may do one day. And one of them is like a Jelly Bean Dodge Caravan. I think it's like a 99 to '02, the big
Yeah.
Jelly Bean. And what I want to do is do mid-engine and do like an Explorer 88 and do like oil drums over the rear tires and tub it. And it would be really funny to keep the stock V6 like 3 liter up front, drive to the track with that totally quiet, and then fire up the rear like a 4L80E, twin turbo, 6 liter, and the sliding door just shows it all, right? Like I think everybody's seen that picture of the Volkswagen van with the blown big block in the center. And they
Just open the doors up for
the
car
sliding
show.
door is open and the big block is in there that probably overheats and never goes anywhere and gets trailered. Anyway, we'll suppress my hate for that stuff. But it would be cool to either have that and have like a 40-gallon aluminum cell in the engine bay, or have the actual Dodge engine in the front just show up and go through tech and be like, here it is, like, and then and then bust off like a 760 with it because it makes 1400 horsepower and it's tubbed and everything. It'd be hard to hide it, but it would be hilarious. So that would be funny. And then the other thing is, uh, I have always thought my wife was like, her first car was an Escort GT. And I've always thought it'd be cool to get like an Escort wagon and make it LS rear wheel drive. Because I've never seen that happen. So that would be funny. I like those old Mercedes with the weird grill in the front, like 70s or 80s Mercedes. Not like the square one, but the Hitler wagon ones. Those look so cool in my opinion. Uh, my buddy has Mike Page bought one. I don't know if he still has it, but I always wanted to do one of those. But literally, it's one of those things where I see something and I'm like, I want to sacrilege that car. One of the ones like in the last 2 years, I go to the GTR World Cup and there's GTRs there, and there's the only classes up until last year were for the V6 and the 6-speed trans. You could only have essentially a stock or highly modified stock-ish GTR. And this last year, they took the street class and they allowed dual clutch transmission cars, which is Porsche, R8, like a whole bunch of cars, and RS3. And a lot of them came and like decimated the class because essentially that Nissan platform in a stock car class is old compared to like a twin turbo R8 or an RS3 or and what was really funny is there's a shop near me called AIM Performance, and they build we go to like Atco Raceway and people would show up in a street car that's like a 911 Porsche and bust off like an 860 wheelie through first and second gear. 860, like they drove to the track, they have no cage. 860, get kicked out, go home. So those guys were showing up and like mopping everybody up. There's 1320 videos of them and they're freaking out because this car is doing like a 45-degree wheelie out of the hole. I'm like, I see those guys at Atco like every other weekend. It's no surprise, but they made a big deal about it. I mean, it is cool if you've never seen it, but they're right here. They're like 30 minutes away from me. But yeah, I think of stuff like that all the time. Recently, my wife bought a Porsche. I say Porsche, even though it's supposed to be Porsche. It triggers Porsche owners. But we were thinking about buying a fairly crappy one and LS swapping it. And while we were shopping, she essentially found one that we might swap. And it's been so good, and she loves it so much, she's leaving it go. But it has a bunch of mods already, so it's not essentially stock, but it's all Porsche at this point. And she's like, I don't want to touch it. Don't bother. And yeah.
Dang, your answer made my answer look not very good.
Oh, well, that's just, I'm used to being, like you said, you're like, I hope I'm not boring. And I'm like, I could soapbox for 7 hours, and frequently I do. So don't feel bad. This is a good one. This is great. Do you think 6L transmissions will get better aftermarket support? And that's something we touched on a bunch of times, but
Just like for mechanical parts,
yeah,
I
like
don't see why not.
I mean like a standalone controller, or make it easier to put it on cars that don't have it, or stuff like that.
I hope so because they're awesome, and they're just as popular as like a 4L60 in their time. So they're just popular trannies. So I don't know. The more they start coming out of the stock vehicles, the more the demand's going to be for that stuff. So I could see it happening for sure.
I have like wished it would happen for a long time, and that's why I have friends that do pretty wild CAN bus things, and I have been being very dictator like and yelling at them essentially like, can you please make a Holley CAN bus box that converts numbers to satiate the internal TCU for a 6L80 to make it work with a Holley? Because I think a lot of people don't know it's and I don't know all the specifics. Someone might laugh at me, but it's a mechatronic and it needs to be completely happy with what's going on, or it grabs neutral, or it slides in and out of gear that it burns itself immediately. It shift
Same
flares. Oh,
if
go.
you have a mismatch operating systems with the ECM TCM on stock stuff, it's the same thing. Yeah.
And it can be, people hated it, and it can be awful, and it can be amazing. Like, I know a bunch of people that tune like fifth gen Camaros. Not, they're heavy as hell, and they make like 850 wheel, and they pound them for like 2 years, no problem, because it's all programming that keeps those together. Essentially, it's not like an A to E that makes wide open shifts and holds it. It can't do that at all. It needs significant. That's why I always laugh when people are like, I deleted torque management. Well, if you did, the thing would hang on the limiter and slide into second gear in 10 seconds and burn the entire clutch pack out of the trans. So, no. But those transmissions are incredible when set up correctly, but very few people can set them up correctly.
Yeah, there's a lot of tuning to be done in there to help them out in a stock setting.
Because that's what people I think don't realize is there's a computer in it that needs to be happy. Otherwise, it's choosing the lesser evil and burning itself or not. It goes into neutral. That's what I learned like on my buddy Arnie's car. I got that standalone to work it, and if it's not happy, it doesn't go into reverse at all. It doesn't go into drive at all. It's in neutral or park all the time.
It's like it protects itself almost.
If you're driving down the road and it gets mad on the 1-2 shift, you just have nothing. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, I screwed up on one thing and it asks for neutral instead of anything else if it thinks something's wrong. It's super annoying, but what's cool about that is if you have a heavy car, the gear ratios on that are incredible. Otherwise, if you have a pretty fast car, I think a 6-speed is not useful at all because it's making more gear changes than it is accelerating, in my opinion. But, oh, then people are asking about the Summit 4L80E 6-speed, or what I call the TCI 6X or whatever they call it. And I had recent experience with one, and it's absolute hot garbage, which is what I expected, because it's using the overdrive circuit to split the gears. It's not a 6-speed. It's applying overdrive in between the gears like a Mack truck transmission where it has a splitter, a high and a low in the gearbox. Do you ever hear about those?
I haven't.
It's a fake 6-speed where it splits the overdrive into the gears. And I recently did a car where it had that, and it was total hot garbage. It was difficult to set up, and it was very like it was like a bad 6L80E setup where it flared and it would and I'm like, what the hell is it doing? And then it would downshift when I don't want. Regardless of programming, it was difficult to tell it what to do. In my opinion, if you buy a 4L80E 6-speed, you should just have a 4L80E. It's much easier because this car had a Holley Dominator and had a TCI 4L80E 6-speed. And I'm like, if you would unplug and throw away that controller and plug it into the Dominator, this car would be incredible. But you chose to hurt yourself. You're a masochist. Oh, what is it? What have we got here? What else? Uh, Oh, will or does Holley have a plug and play for Gen 3 trucks? I mean, this is like they don't. They don't have anything like that. And I think that they will avoid that as much as possible because of EPA stuff, which is probably what you would say.
Yeah, that stuff's coming down hard right now, so try to stay away from it.
Separating yourself from that is, and they don't have any reason to do that, so why would they put their neck out essentially? And then people are like, my 6L80E is awesome, but yeah, essentially it's extremely difficult unless you're doing like what you offer, a completely stock setup where they are so happy together that there's no issue. And then what did someone ask? What types of harness identification do you use? I use Parl 360 heat shrink printer for mine and it works nice. I guess like
So like
a
my labels,
label printer,
I
essentially.
use a Brady thermal printer, and I just type them all out and do them all individual. I don't mass produce any of that stuff. I just do each one, on each harness as I build it.
So a
And
Brady.
yeah, you just kind of wrap it and it kind of laminates itself almost. It has like a 3/4 inch strip with the writing on it, and you just wrap over it with the clear part.
Then
I
I
used
mean,
to use oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, you.
So that man, this is something I've evolved to, but I used to put tape on there so people could tear it off easily because I had I don't even remember what kind of labeler it was, but it just folded onto itself and it was like a little flag hanging off. So people were having a hard time getting them off. They were ugly. So I started doing tape so they could just rip it off easy. And then people were complaining about that. So I switched over to thermal printer, and it's very clean and very simple and durable. And, you can't smudge it and all that stuff. So I stick to that now. But yeah, those are the best things when they can laminate themselves like that and they're not hanging out like a little flag to catch on stuff.
Yeah, the Holley harness is kind of like that when they're a flag and you can tear it off if you want. And then people were complaining that the tags are wrong or not on at all, which I mean, when you mass produce anything, that's going to happen. But people
I've done
are.
it. I've mislabeled, left and right side. I've mispinned things left and right side. It's all part of it.
It's nice to hear someone admit that because a lot of people that say they have no problems ever are lying anyway.
Yeah, I've mispinned, you know, I don't know, maybe a handful of them over time, but it does happen.
Yeah, every now and then. I think one of my questions was supposed to be what I was going to ask a bunch of people to do tuning and whatever is like, what did you learn in the last couple of years that you would never do again? And simple stuff like that. So maybe that can apply to you for wiring. Like, what did you used to do that you would never do again? Because there's plenty of stuff as I've learned and evolved that I used to do and I would never do again simply because of doing it 3 times in a row or whatever else.
I think when I first started doing this, I look back on it. The tape, I used to use tape on the main trunk of the harness and a split nylon loom to cover the main trunk of the harness. And looking back on it, everything that would come out onto your engine was nice and seamless and shrink tubed. And then the part that would be under your dash had tape. And I've changed all that stuff now. But when I look back on those older harnesses, I'm like, man, that was horrible. It was it was functional and everything was fine, but it's just not as clean as it is now.
So tape is
Other than
your
that, I just hate that stuff, man. I pretty much do everything the same as I did when I first started doing them, which is crazy. I haven't evolved a ton, just a little bit here and there with like labels, and got rid of the little bits of tape that I would use and that kind of stuff.
this guy
But
asked
nothing's really changed majorly.
just tape,
That's that's it, man.
tape. And then Potato R33 again. He goes, "What's your favorite stuff to work on or with?" Maybe he can elaborate. He can give us some stuff to that, but I guess that means like what's your favorite harnesses to do or what's rewarding or what vehicles do you I don't know. That's kind of open-ended. So interpret that as you will.
I guess they're all kind of the same to me to work on. Nothing. When it has a transmission, man, when I see an electronic transmission connector, I'm like, okay, that's going to take me an extra hour to clean up. So when I see that, I'm like, gosh, I like manual transmissions, just a vehicle speed sensor connection. But I mean, pretty much they're all the same thing.
Is that because, and I know this from working on stuff, there's a range selector and the rear O2 sensors and the fuel pump stuff that's all attached to that you have to remove 90% of the wiring. And then you have to ask somebody, are they going to use a range selector? Are they going to use whatever? And then people don't know. And then I know that those are completely glued together. Like they have a factory.
The
Maybe
range selector stuff is, yeah.
they're like epoxied together on those cars. I feel like you can never disconnect it without ruining it.
On the earlier ones, yeah, they have two connectors. They have epoxy in them, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, this is glued. Someone glued this.
Blow dryer. Just get it hot with a blow dryer and it'll come right apart.
Oh, there's a tip. But I mean,
But
oh,
again, that almost never goes back into a swap harness.
yeah.
So, like those transmission harnesses they're long, and I stick it on my little holder at the end, and I pull all the wires apart because they're all stuck together, straighten everything out, make sure it didn't get cut or burned on anything. But that's usually the first thing that gets cut off of people's harnesses anyway. So I'll have to repair it or, put another end on it if it gets smashed. So I guess that's about it. They're all kind of the same.
Then, where do we go? Best aftermarket plug wires for custom length, LS plug wires. Do you use or know anything about that?
I've never really done anything custom length. Everything that I work on, it usually just the stock length will be fine. But I ordered from Hinson Motorsports some MSD wires from them, and I've had good luck with those. I ordered a couple different sets, and you test each one, and had bad luck with a couple of different companies, but those Hinson Motorsport wires have been pretty good.
All right. I'm scrolling through more and more questions, but if people have stuff to ask right now, let me know while I go back up through so I go back down. I'm terrible at this, so I'm just reading through. Anything else you want to add while I do the intermission and read through a ton of chat here?
No, I'm pretty boring for the most part.
Oh, this is funny. Do your rodents like your harnesses?
My rodents?
Or do you have,
yeah.
do you frequently get stuff that's chewed apart or whatever?
Yeah, quite a bit actually. I think they like the static that the electricity creates, so they just chew on them.
Huh. That's interesting. I mean, I think most people that have ever done ripping a motor out at a junkyard have seen there's literally a squirrel nest or a rat's nest underneath the intake. They love to get under that truck intake. There's like 3-4 inches of room, and
The foam, yeah, they'll just chew through the foam, and then it's a nice little warm nest for them.
They build
a
in there.
lot of injector connectors get the little teeth marks all over them. It's pretty common to see.
Here's a good one. Is there any way to air seal a regular grommet if you have to go oversized to fit connectors through?
So sometimes if it's an odd, like if you're feeding everything on like a harness that I would do from the inside out, the seals it 2-piece grommet, you can cut the whole whatever diameter you want inside the rubber. So that's a good way to kind of make it custom fit. You just drill like a 2-inch hole, use the grommet. It's got like a metal trim ring on it, and then you just cut the inside rubber to whatever size you want.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen those where Holley has sent me 1 or 2 of those. I forget what brand. They own like 65 brands, but similarly, you put it through and you can rivet or self-tap it or whatever. I bought like a 4 or 5 pack on eBay.
Thank you.
Where is it freezing in there or what?
It's probably in the 40s.
Oh, that's cold. That's cold. I bought like a bunch of eBay style ones where it's like a giant cone and you can cut it.
Yeah, I've used those before.
And that has worked pretty good also.
But when it's that way, it's something that I got to put on and feed through when I'm putting it together also. So that 2-piece grommet works good all the time.
And then, have you thought about using permasleeve labels for the Brady label maker? You know what that is? I don't
Yeah,
know.
like they'll shrink down over the labels, I believe, the clear shrink tube.
That's what the guy does on my. I have my harnesses subbed out, as most people can probably tell. I don't have time to make hundreds of those. But he puts like the raccoon logo, and it has yellow with the logos, and it says like alternator, whatever, power tap, and then he has clear heat shrink over it. And I think his thing does exactly what this guy's asking.
Yeah, I just use enough length on the black stuff to put my label on that.
And then someone asks, you probably know exactly what this is, GXL, TXL, or how do you say this? Svetzel wire? That TEFZEL, I always laugh because I don't know how the hell to say that.
When I'm building a new harness, I use TXL only. I think I put a little video a couple years ago with my little torch to show the differences between like the stock wiring and some of this low dollar aftermarket that doesn't use quite a quality wire. The plastic sleeving on it just melts. The TXL stuff's really good around heat.
Or cracks. Like, I always make fun of when I see fourth gen F bodies when I have to tune them or work on them, because you can like grab the wire and just wiggle it and it cracks off, like the shielding and the vinyl or
Right.
whatever, just it breaks completely off. And that's why most of those cars are hot garbage. People are always mad about the tune or something else, and I'm like, your mass air meter doesn't work, you're not getting power to this, like your harness is, nobody chewed on it, but the harness destroyed itself in 10 years, 20 years, unfortunately for you, bud.
That's an issue a lot of people have with rebuilding harnesses. They think, it's been through so many heat cycles that it's just garbage instantly. But and that's one thing that I do that other people don't, is it gets completely ripped apart. So I notice issues like that. If it's going to crack, or if it's dried up, or anything is damaged on it, it gets replaced.
Someone asks here, like, grammar police, but doing wiring harnesses drive you insane yet?
No, no, I kind of enjoy it. I put my headphones in, I listen to Ramstein as loud as I can, and just build these things.
Well, I think you've said to me, you autopilot. You barely use any thought. It just is time consuming at the time.
For the most part, it's all the same. So when it's something super custom, I'll take a little bit of time to make sure I'm doing it all the way it needs to be done. But yeah, it's all pretty basic. I just turn the music on and just get it done.
This is a good one. I've asked this a bunch of times. We talked about it earlier. I'm interested in these connectors, but like my friend was like, don't even bother, because I've explained that I don't have good foresight. And he's like, if you buy a 50 pin connector and you're dumb and you don't plan, you're kind of screwed. But it's a good question. Do you have a preference or recommendation for a multi pin bulkhead connector, like a cannon plug, like we were talking about earlier?
So I got a local friend here that uses Deutschworks. How do you say that?
I think, or it's DT. I call them DTs because I always say it wrong and people get triggered and yell at me. I call it a DT connector. I think it's a Deutsch connector because whenever I say a Deutsch Works connector, people are like, that's a fuel company, you moron. It's an injector and fuel. And I'm like, okay, sorry, sorry, sorry. But so I say DT, a Deutsch connector, a Deutsch
So those
terminal.
are something I've used here and there for different things to go through a firewall or whatever, but I don't usually use things like that.
Yeah, like I said to you, all of my friends that do that are like, don't use it unless it's a race car and it's coming out every 3 hours. Don't do it. It's that simple because you don't need it. Don't do it. Any breaks in the wiring are like, you want it to look cool, and not to discount anybody saying anything. I want to try it and I want to use it, and it does look cool. But as far as most professionals are like, it's another point of failure. Don't use it.
Yeah, there's a very precise amount of voltage going through those wires, and any change, in the wire, a split in it's going to create a problem.
I'd say if you absolutely need to, DT sells bulkhead through terminal. They sell the regular, like a DT12 pin, which I love to use. They sell it with like the screw ears on it to screw it to something so you can plug the DT in. But I'm assuming he means like a 60 pin Canon plug
Yeah, stuff
that
I
like
don't normally use at all.
that
Yeah, I know.
screws on or has the ratchet like a quarter half turn. And
Right.
I have had it in my shopping cart many times on Bollinger sells like a huge it's expensive to get a small like a 24 pin. It's very close to the price to get like a 60 or 70 pin or whatever the biggest one is. It's like $96, but it's everything. And I've thought many times of buying it and trying to use it, but then realized on my own the complexity and having to do that and me screwing it up anyway. I'd be so annoyed that I ruined $100 connector when I was trying to look cool. It's like buying nice rims and then curbing them when you know
Right.
you have bad luck and you're going to pull into a Burger King and rash your expensive cool rim. That's the that's a far stretch, but that's the same. Oh, someone says, are you familiar with braiding wires and harnesses and do you think it's excess? Well, I think the concentric is excess, but I think braiding like a VR crank signal or ABS is good because they're so noisy and they have a variable voltage range. I don't know what you think.
So I don't do any of that stuff either. I
Straight.
just kind of everything's straight. Yeah.
I mean, I've
I think
done
there's like a vehicle speed sensor or things like that that are always that way on stock stuff. Um, so yeah, I don't do it, but I understand why it's done.
what's a good source for wiring and components?
So we talked about this beginning. Waytech, Mauser, TE. There's a bunch of sites, but again, if you don't go there with a part number, you're gonna just pull your hair out trying to find what you're looking for.
You're gonna have a bad day. That's why I recommend Bollinger to everybody. It might be more
Yeah,
expensive,
pictures.
but pictures, the comparison connectors or whatever they call it, I'm gonna look it up right now because it literally says like mating connectors. It's so nice. And then also what they have is it says connector by number of ways. You can literally you can click a 3-pin connector. And it makes it easy. If you have no clue what it is, you can click 5-pin connector and you can find it. It's extremely easy. So they have like 1-way, 2-way. So if I look at like a 3-way connector and I click on like an old GM map sensor connector, it says associated and mating plugs, and it shows terminals, seals, the kit, the pin kit, the pigtail. Like if it's like we said, if you're nervous about pinning or you have no tools, it sells them like pigtailed means it has like a 6-inch pigtail. It's already crimped, and you can ugly red crimp those things on. Which I have like learned that that's the most awful thing from what I do now. And also, not to mention, it makes the harness 6 times larger if you start using those.
So if you see a nest of electrical tape, that's usually what I see underneath of them.
Is the AutoZone plastic insulated garbage under there?
Yeah, the butt connector is, you know, one thing, and the tape's one thing. But when you see them both together, it was a real rookie in there.
Uh, do you need the correct boot for proper strain relief? I'm not sure exactly what that's. I mean, I guess it depends on what strain relief you're going after or kind of using, but I don't think the boot offers any physical strength over top of the wires or the crimp itself, other than it keeps stuff from getting in. If you have like a car that sees weather a lot, so it doesn't green out the wiring, or like my buddy Devin does a lot of methanol cars and he has to use the really high end Raychem because the alcohol, when they're obviously race car, they're ripping it apart all the time. There's alcohol fuel all over everything. It'll disintegrate the wiring sleeving, from what I hear. So they have the boots, like there's the injector harness and you usually see wiring, everything's booted to the extreme because getting alcohol in there ruins all of it.
So on the stock stuff, they have their secondary clip to hold everything in, to hold the rubber seal in and tight. So that kind of relieves strain on the crimp in a way, I guess.
I would say most of the time you want no strain on your connector at all, ever. So if you have to strain relief something, it's a complete band-aid that you shouldn't be doing.
Makes good sense, yeah.
I don't know what they mean. Maybe they have an underlying question and we're not answering it, but maybe they can fill that back in. Do you usually remove the battery current sensor, or do people ever opt to keep them? I've heard of these. Someone sent me one, a battery current, like a current sensor from GM, and I have
Mhm.
no idea how to use it, and I would love to test it sometime. And like I have a Dominator that's going to go in my gray car. It'd be funny to put like the current sensor on my battery wire and just see what my current is for no reason.
So I'll leave those if I build a direct plug-in. Um, I won't build it from scratch. I'll fix what somebody sends me or whatever if it's going into a stock Silverado or whatever, and it has that. I think they started doing that in like 05-ish or something. I'll leave it all in there and clean it up and make it nice. But on a swap harness, I take all that stuff out.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. If it's application and vehicle specific, you want to keep the most stuff in. So check engine lights and everything else aren't coming on, but otherwise there's no reason for it. But like I mentioned, it would be cool to use it just for no reason in a custom aspect to know how it works and what it does. Why do they use that on a stock computer? Do you know?
I don't know. It just
I,
goes on the negative terminal, usually on the battery terminal.
what is it looking at and what is it doing? Who knows?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
It's like those it's like a meme or something. Or when the guy's mom, the meatloaf. What movie is that? Step Brothers or
Um,
something? Get the meatloaf,
Wedding
mom.
crackers.
And he's like, I don't know what she's doing up there. I never know what she's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the current sensor is to me. Nobody knows what it's doing. Just like
It
post
definitely it'll create an engine light or a charging light on your dash if it's something's funky with it though.
all
Like inst
it's just a check engine light generator. Um, have you ever looked into 3D printing your own connector cases?
Oh man, that's I have a hard enough time with just this computer I'm on.
Or I mean, I guess that would you find any benefit if you could use one? Is there anything you would like to use it for, or you could find a specific use for?
If it was some kind of weatherproof box that I built that had like a rubber gasket in it or some kind of O-ring or something. Other than that, there's just so much stuff out there that's pretty cheap to use. Or like that fuse box you just sent me. It's way ahead of anything that I would start building right now.
That's what
There's
was
there's a lot of options already.
that's what I love because I'm like obsessed with finding because you can get a $30 fuse box and I've built them like the Chinese ones. I've crimped it all and whatever, and I'm obsessed with finding a decent medium between a lot of things, a lot of like turbos and everything. That's why I do what I do. Is I'm like so economically driven, and I love the fact of like the single stud feeding a 30 output race wire thing that I have and then getting a Chinese fuse panel that you have to crimp. So that's how I found, eventually, after like months of searching dumb stuff, I found that easy LSX PDU that I sent you. And what's cool is I contacted them and I was like, I want to buy it anyway to check it out, but are you interested in sending this to me to check out? And they said yes. And I said to him the other day, I feel bad about sitting on this for so long, but I feel like I would do it a grave injustice. But part of me is like, why aren't more things having the central feed and the multiple outputs with a simpler case? Even if it was a box that had the 6 millimeter stud or an 8 millimeter stud, and it had 10 ground wires and then a whole bunch of high current outputs, people would buy the hell out of it, but nobody makes it. So this is the closest thing I've found that's not $1,000 to start. Because I think ECU Masters has the cheapest one, and it's like $1,100, and I think it does 12 outputs.
With all the relay
It's solid
connectors there.
state. and everything, and it's programmable. But the funny thing to me is the people that want an entry level for that, programming it, setting up the current, using a laptop, they don't want to. They don't want to at all. So making that, making something in between that's manually triggered but as simple as a single stud has a huge market.
Yeah, just make it all very simple for whoever's going to use it.
Which is kind of what Stu has. If I could talk him into making like a 10 circuit with a single stud. And I've talked to like EFI Source. I'm like, make this, make it, just make it. And he's like, I don't have specific manufacturing for that. It would be like, it's not as easy as I see it as easy in my head. And I'm like forcing it on people like the 6L80E CAN bus controller for Holley. I'm like, just do it. And I'm like pushing people and they're like, it's not that easy. And I'm like, I'm just a jerk. And I'm like, I don't see how it's not that easy. Just do it.
There's all those individual bus strips that you can get, the low dollar things that you just run a main to, and it has 10 screws on it that you can go off of, but definitely not as clean as somebody else that could build, like you said, all the relay outputs and all that stuff would be nice. All of it centralized.
I'm almost interested in hiring somebody, because what are those web pages? You can order a circuit board. You can design a circuit board and you can order them in like a 20 pack or a 100 pack. And I almost want to hire someone to design one that has like an 8mm stud that holds 40 amp relays and has ground triggers. And then it has like screw on terminals for whatever, varying outputs. People don't always need 40 amps on each circuit, but I would love to have that designed correctly and just sell it. But I don't have the time, expertise, or liability to figure something like that out. Mom, the meatloaf, this guy says. Totally right.
How long has he been building those easy LSX boxes?
Man, I don't even know. Because I searched forever.
I've never heard of him or seen him, or people have never even brought it up to me. I've seen a lot of other stuff, but that's such a cool box. You'd think it got more popular.
That's
over
why
time.
I would love to show people like its use case. But part of what's, not to throw him under the bus or make him look bad, part of what's difficult about that is you have to do everything. If something like that existed where it had, like I keep saying, 10, if it had an 8mm stud and it has 10 outputs. Like I know a lot of Ford chassis trucks, like my friend works where he installs plows and does work for bucket trucks and stuff like that. So they buy a complete tool chassis bucket truck stock, and it's a Ford, and it has that auxiliary panel where it has like 6 switches, and next to the battery it has an entire fuse panel with like screw-on terminals for you to do flashers, external lighting, inverters. And the switches, it's pre-wired, it has everything, but it's not like the super expensive whatever race panel that is. It's white. You probably know exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's got like the little touch.
It's white.
It's almost like a touchpad. Yeah, I know what you're talking
about. It has like a IDE cable, is a ribbon cable connecting to the relay box. Ford has that, and a Raptor and stuff has it too. It has auxiliary box in the engine bay and everything else. And I'm like, if someone could just make that not be a pain in the ass and useful, that's a huge thing, because the only thing that exists between that is a really crappy non-weatherproof Chinese box that you have to crimp yourself, and $1,000 ECU Masters PDM. And I'm like,
nothing in between, huh?
Why doesn't that exist? That's a huge market for someone to step in and make like a $300 box. It's not hot garbage. People would buy the hell out of it. Maybe Stu, because I believe him. It says they completely built this ground up circuit board, which you can tell, because one of my obsessions is finding effective, cheap wiring and fuse panels, because I can't seem to find anything I like for the money.
And that thing would be basically completely universal for any kind of computer system or any kind of vehicle you want to put it in.
And essentially, I found that, I think on eBay, after searching this stuff on Amazon and eBay endlessly, I found that box, and I'm like, this would be incredible if it wasn't complex, because someone has to have a crimper, and your understanding of, I think it's completely empty, right? You have to do the relay, all 4 wires on the relay for every wire.
I didn't look that closely at the connector, but I know it has a couple of larger studs for the higher current starter and fuel pump and things like that. I don't know if you'd have to ground each one individually, if it has a central ground.
That's my biggest question. I know obviously the main power feed is going through the board into a relay, probably, but you can set up your own. My assumption is ground or power trigger, and then you have the output wire, but you have to do all of that. And if you don't have a crimper and you have an issue with figuring that out, it's a nice product and it's cheap, but no one wants to crimp all of that.
If it had a pigtail on it, it might appeal to more people.
Oh, what does someone say here? I hate that the leash is all potted. Yeah, leash stuff is incredible, in my opinion, but they have those big panels for street cars. Some of the leash stuff is actually really nice. Like, I think they have one that's like 5 outputs and it has a stud and everything else. And I know they sell like a twin 70 amp thing that's pretty cool for cooling fans and fuel pumps. I know a bunch of my friends have used. Uh, Scott, I have to look what Scott said. Switch Pros makes a solid state programmable PDM 6, 8, 12 output for Jeeps. You know what's funny is a friend of mine works for the guy or knows a guy that owns Switch Pros, and I have looked at that and considered that. You ever hear about that?
I haven't. I'm looking right now.
It's mostly like a Jeep slash Ultra 4 off road build to suit box.
Oh, I see.
And it has like a Motec slash PDM style soft switch panel, and then it has outputs. But I think that's fairly expensive. It's not that it's a bad price because it is in between, but yeah. I mean, honestly, that's a good answer. That is one of the best things in between.
Yeah, they look very nice.
What is that?
Popular new TV stuff, it looks like.
This is funny. Matt, have you played Borderlands video games? Not at all. I know what they are. Like, I've seen the pictures and whatever, but I have not seen or played it at all. I'm sorry. I'm heading out. Thanks for the discussion. Never used it, so I can't say anything bad about it. Oh, someone else just texted me something about a PDM. He says remind him tomorrow he can give me information on a cheap PDM. Didn't MSD make something like that you're talking about? MSD has, and Holley has sent me a few, and they are incredible, but it's 4 only, and they've recently upgraded the power output, the MSD solid state relay block. You ever see that?
No.
That's actually that's actually a good thing to discuss. It's 4 outputs. It's a relay block, and it has you can put like a 6 gauge wire into the middle of it, and it has 4 outputs, and you can ground or positive trigger it, and it has a fault, thermal, relay, everything built in, and it's solid state, so you can actually PWM it, and it'll automatically pull if it sees too much current or heat. And it's very small. It's nice to use. I have 2 of them actually. I could grab one and show people. So that's awesome. And I used to think it was expensive and useless, and Holley sent me one because I made fun of it so much. My Holley rep was like, here you go. And then I used it and I'm like, wow, this is actually incredible for what it is. So that's awesome, but it's only 4 outputs. But in most cases, like when we talk about Terminator cars where people are like, oh, it's only 4 inputs and outputs. And like I have mentioned, most race cars, like budget, small end race cars, the 4 and 4 is incredible. Like you can still do bump, brake, flex, boost control, like everything you can think of, all in-house with those 4 IO, even if you think it's not that usable. So
Diedenbear has something similar to what you're talking about with a 5 relay unit. You just give it a main power and it has all the outputs, LED lights and things on it. I remember one of my local friends had one in his car. I was just thinking about it and trying to remember what it was when you're talking about the others.
oh, maybe link me to that. But yeah, the Holley one is actually, people were like, even I in the beginning, I'll admit, it was like $150 roughly. And I'm like, man, that's expensive. But then when I thought that they're all solid state relay, SSR. They all have thermal. They all have fuse protection. They have indicator lights, good or bad. They can be ground or positive triggered. You can just literally move the wire and it does everything, and it's single feed, all outputs. I'm like, well, price out doing like 4 Jeep solid state relays that aren't garbage. They're $45 a piece, and then fuse that, and then everything else, it's over $200, $220, $250. So $150 for one that does it all, is clean, comes with mounting brackets. Everything else is actually cheap, and then you can PWM all those outputs. I think up to 1,000 hertz with the Holley. You can probably pulse it faster than that with other setups, but the Holley is usually limited to 1,000 hertz. But I've PWM high current fans and everything, like where normally a fan would yank 75 amps and fall. You can PWM them and it never draws more than 10 amps to go to full fan speed. So obviously there's lots of benefits there. I forgot about that. It's totally right. I keep forgetting that that exists, and it's awesome. Oh, can we get a link to the box you guys are discussing? Which box? We talked about like 6 boxes. I'm sorry.
The easylsx.com, I think it's just right on that thing.
Oh, we talked about that mostly, right?
And I think that's the only thing on that website, isn't it?
It's literally there. We can talk about that. Here, guys. Sorry if you can hear me typing. I have the loudest mechanical keyboard in the world. That's Easy LSX fuse box. That's actually a good question. Is you guys can look at it, and it's like essentially the size of a micro squirt, but it has, I can see 4 relays in it, a ton of fused outputs, and the 80 amp gigantic fuse for all of it, and I think a 6mm stud for power feed. And then it has like a E38 style right angle connector that's incredible also. And then the other one, someone said, which one was it? I'm trying to find the other one. Matt over there mashing his cherry blues. Yep. I think I have cherry browns, guys. I forget. I'm sorry. The particular mechanical keyboard keys, some are louder, some are progressive, some are no click, some are, yeah, I've just learned about them, but I've always had like free $2 keyboards from work because I'm an IT guy, so I take home like garbage keyboards. And I recently was like, is it worth it to buy a better keyboard? And my friend said, yes, I bought a $55 keyboard. And I'm like, oh, it's actually really nice. And now I'm ruined because I spent too much on a keyboard. What is it? What is that one? We just talked about it.
You're talking about some MSD stuff.
The fuse box that someone makes. And he's actually local to me. What is it? I'll go over this question real quick. Matt, have you ever come across the sloppy stage 2 that required a shorter length than stock push rod? Shorter length? I know Dario talks about this, my Canadian buddy. He says he needs like a slightly longer or shorter push rod, and I've never done it, but he knows more than I do, and he's much more careful. So I've never had to do it, and I've always had no problem. Where is Switch Pros? Oh man, that took me a while to find. Oh yeah, right here. Switch Pros, customizable LED, Switch Pro panel. All right, let's find it quick and I'll paste it to you guys. It's $550. Yep, this is incredible, but it's $550. I feel like something else must exist. Like this is incredible product actually, but I keep thinking something has to exist in between this. But if you look at what you get out of this, not really. This is pretty good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. 8 user programmable switches, 4 35 amp, 4 20 amp. Waterproof, solid state, 125 amp. It has like a giant feed. I posted it in the chat, Andy. But essentially it has the same thing. It has a switch panel. It has a gigantic, like a 6 feed wire that goes into a stud, and it's waterproof. And I mean, that's pretty good for $550. I'll admit, it's pretty incredible. So yeah, that exists, but part of me is like, can't that exist for 350 or 3? I don't know. Maybe I'm pushing the boundaries, right? So that's pretty incredible, actually. Yeah, I don't know if didn't I have problems with pushrod links? And actually, honestly, Fairmont 5 just kicked me in the balls the entire time I owned it. And I believe most of my issues were I had a LC9 5.3 liter, and I feel like the crank is just not in the right spot on those because it has a VVT built in. I think the crank is retarded slightly, and there's all sorts of weird stuff. Anyway, I've never had anybody that had an LC9 based vehicle make appropriate power. Oh, I wish I knew about Easy LSX 2 weeks ago. I'm in the process of rewiring my entire off-road buggy right now. So yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm thinking we're all caught up. I think we're caught up on everything, guys. So we'll have an early night instead of me going to bed at 2 and then going to tuning. Anything else you want to add, guys, or add a question, or Andy wants to throw in his favorite popcorn, or whatever else?
I'm just a simple guy.
Get at it. Get out of
I
your.
don't have a lot to talk about it.
Get out of your 40-degree shop early.
Yeah.
They all say, I mean, thanks for all the info. The biggest issue is allowing 10 40 amp relays with a single 8mm stud is 250 amps, and the copper PCB being too thin to carry the current without going horribly expensive boards. Thank you, electrical engineer answer right there. What I'm asking for is physically dumb, and that's my problem. And that's a nice answer is saying that I'm asking for too much. Thanks, Andy and Matt. What's your favorite movie? They're saying.
My favorite movie? Absolutely Back to the Future.
Oh, nice. Which one? Isn't there like 5 of them?
All 3 of them, yeah.
There's
all 3 of them. I'm an 80s kid, so that was the best thing ever. And it still is.
I mean, they're good, but I never got that big into them. I was born in 84, so they were very popular, and I watched them all, and they're cool, but I don't know what my favorite movie would be. I like a lot of movies. I watch stuff all the time, and I'm overly critical, and I don't know why. And people can say that I'm a jerk. Again, I don't mind people calling me a jerk, but I hate when I start a movie, and in 5 minutes I know exactly protagonist, antagonist. I know what's going to happen. I'm not surprised by it. And to me, that just kills it. I don't care what happens. I'm just annoyed because I was supposed to be entertained and I already know what's happening. Like I said, maybe I'm a jerk, but I can't enjoy anything that I already know is what's happening. I want to learn or be surprised. Plenty of people are like, that's dumb. I'm just watching a movie to turn my brain off. That's what my wife does. She watches sometimes dumb stuff, but it's because she's so A-type overactive. She needs stuff to like turn herself off. And she's like, oh, this is retarded. I'll watch this for a while.
It turns into nap time. If it's something like that.
It turns your brain off for a while.
Yeah.
That's what she needs. Her brain is on all the time. Matt, do you think you can batch fire with igniters for Ford motors? I don't know enough about. This is something I know nothing about. And I hate that there's like 2-wire ignition systems. Like then it needs an igniter or it needs whatever for an aftermarket. That's like the most annoying thing for the Ford stuff. And the Hemi stuff, in my opinion, is you need like an entire aftermarket box to fire the coils. It's just annoying as hell. I think they should just make people do LS coils because that cuts the wiring. I mean, that's the cheapest Terminator and stuff you can buy is because it has relatively, I mean, people call the smart coils the really expensive ones, but technically all the small 5-volt whatever reference are all smart because they do their own job, and then you give it a little blip and then it does all of its high current stuff automatically. Anyway, I have no idea about Ford stuff, about modular or igniters or 2-wire or CD. Maybe I'm dumb, but I don't care to know anything about that stuff. All right. Oh, there's one more, and then I guess we'll quit. Is there a wiring way that you know of to have a P01 computer talk to a GM CAN bus? Yeah, it doesn't exist. It has a serial output essentially, right? It has no
Right.
idea unless someone built the most complex CAN bus translator in the world for essentially no reason. And then also a P59 does not output enough stuff to convert to a E67 to understand what's going on anyway. I wonder what the underlying.
If they're trying to do some kind of CAN bus data on a 24x engine, the E40 would be what you'd have to do.
Yep, I'm glad you said that. E40 is cancer. Oh man.
Yes, absolutely. I don't touch the harnesses, the computers. If it's a completely stock vehicle with the computer already in it, I'll work on it, but I'm not doing anything swap related with them.
Like bricks itself for no reason. What people might not know is before GM went 24 to 58, they started doing that LS2 E40 stuff. And I think what they had is no clear direction on getting from P59 to E38, right? So they built this E40 garbage that's application specific for like GTO, Trailblazer SS, and some other things, which are
Corvettes,
garbage,
yeah.
garbage conglomerate platforms anyway, and specific and pain in the ass and dumb, and the ECU is dumb, and the car is dumb, and the wiring's dumb. You go to read and write those with HP tuners, and it's like 73 hours to read, and
Yeah.
you're like, why? And then like I forget what it was, like brick itself. And then what you learn is like you need to pull 70% of the fuses out of the fuse box so you can actually tune it. And just dumb
Yes.
things. And you're like, this is all garbage. Yeah, anything that has an E40, I'm like, nope, I won't touch it. And people are like, why does everyone say I have an LS2 GTO? Why will no one touch it? And you're like, sell it. Nope, don't mod it. Just drive it. Throw it at the GM dealer. Nope.
One of my local friends here bought a Trailblazer Super Sport
Oh,
and was all excited about it. And then I was like, oh, it's an '05 or 6 or whatever. It has an E40. I'm like, okay, we'll just have to work around it. But it's been a nightmare from day one until now.
never stops. Never stops being a nightmare. I think a bunch of people have asked me to touch Trailblazers, and the only reason I would is if I saw on Sloppy one or two people did a complete integrated Terminator because they know how bad an E40 is. That's all I would tune is a completely integrated Terminator that where it completely removes the stock computer. I've played with one or two of my friends had one, and like if you stab it from a stop, it does that thing where the vehicle speed doesn't work and the tranny doesn't shift.
So the local one here that I've been working on, he used PCM of NC, I think, something like that, to do the 4L80E conversion.
Yep.
So there's a whole nother variable there to throw into the mix of nonsense. So it's all just a big mess.
I've had a
You can't
bunch.
scale anything to where it'll work. I mean, it's got an LSA blower on it too, so trying to scale stuff into it and it's just a
It's
mess.
difficult when people don't know the nuances of HP tuners to try to explain to somebody the physical caps on an E40 that are huge pain in the ass. Like injector size is limited to like 60 pounds.
Yeah, something like that.
So you have to scale the hell out of something to work, and then all your numbers are wrong, and then the tranny doesn't shift anyway, and then the vehicle speed doesn't work. So even if you have a good tranny that does shift, it won't because it reports no vehicle speed. And then the body control gets mad and tells it to just shut off, and it won't read the ECU, and you can't data log, and the dash doesn't work, and then yeah, it's
Never ending.
if I haven't explained enough, yeah, as soon as you fix one or two things, 12 other ones pop up. And then, and then like you get the car fast enough and then it spins all the rod bearings and it's still slow because it's 5,000 pounds and there's no redeeming. There's no, yeah. Meanwhile, they could have bought a '03 Silverado and hung an 80 millimeter and made 800 wheel and just, completely shit on a Trailblazer with having more towing capacity and actual bed and anyway, well, I digress. I digress. We don't need to talk about it anymore. They're really awful. That's why people ask me like, why do you hate Trailblazers and why do you hate S10s and why? I'm like this. The cards stacked against that vehicle are gigantic as far as comparison to whatever you want to do with it. So it's just and you can admit it. It's like someone that wants a Ferrari that's unreliable. I just want a Ferrari. Okay, that's fine, but don't tell me it's cheap, easy, economical, whatever. Just admit why you want to do it. Don't give me games. Anyway, soapbox session at the look at the Switch Pros, blah blah blah. Switch Pros, yeah, the Switch Pros looks pretty incredible. I have to admit, I forgot about it, and I know a guy that like his boss owns Switch Pros or something like that, so they do all the Ultra 4 stuff. But yeah, so it's almost 11 here. We'll get Andy out of his shop. We can hear he's getting a cold already from being
Yeah,
in
it's
there.
it's I'll look. It's probably not as cold as I'm thinking.
You're just not moving.
52.
It feels cold.
Yeah, it's 50. This is the only quiet place where I'm at.
Yeah.
Because when we started on this, it was 5 o'clock here and sunny, and everybody's driving around and kids are playing, so I had to hide out in here.
One guy says, "Thanks, Andy, for all your info. Could you please update your website with more gallery pictures?"
It's so yes, it's very basic and plain. As soon as that domain was available, I bought it and just threw that stuff on there quickly, so it was something. Yeah, I have tons of stuff to put on there. I just haven't had time to put it on there.
I would say your Facebook page, you post way more stuff on, and also same as me. I have no artistic ability, so I can't build a nice web page. So my web page looks like a 3-year-old did it, and I don't care because, yeah, like you have so much phone or word of mouth or Facebook traffic that the web page you just needed, so no one else would buy it. A placeholder is what I always say mine is.
That's exactly what it turned into. Yeah.
Oh, this guy, real quick at the end, he says, "What's a good wire to buy, brand or type?" And I think you said TXL.
TXL. Yep.
Yeah.
Best quality I've used. It's good stuff. It's
For the money,
probably a little
it's
more
the best you
expensive.
can get.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I guess we're pretty much done, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll call it an early night. And early because the other ones were excessive. Like, it's funny, you think like you're not important and you don't have a lot to say, whereas the other one, I think the other one I did was like 6 hours, and I'm like, man, I hope it's not 6 hours again. I was so tired. I was so tired. But you know, we had a lot between me soapboxing and other people talking. It can be ridiculous at times. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for joining in. Thanks Andy for sharing all of your insight and everything else. And I'm sure a bunch of people have said already, like, man, I have to check him out or send him my stuff, or I didn't realize he existed. So that's the whole point of these is giving people insight and, you know, possible avenues and everything else. So that's it. What time is it there?
It's 8 o'clock.
Oh,
Just under 8 o'clock.
Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Yeah. Okay. Well, see you later, guys, and see you later, Andy. And thanks for being on. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate people might not know, people may know Andy has done, you know, sponsorships and partial sponsorships for a bunch of my projects. So he's always helped me out. And I just want to say I appreciate it. I should have said it earlier in the show, obviously, that you have helped me out and a lot of your stuff is amazing. And I don't say it to get stuff. I think people know that about me. I don't say it's good if it's not good. But yeah, your stuff, I saw it and I was like, this is incredible. I really like how this is done. I really like the tree trunk, as I call it, the style that you do. Because I really hate that when it's an injector, 1-inch coil pack, an injector, 1-inch, and you can't plug anything in, and you're like pulling the connector, and you're like, well, this isn't going to end well. I'm going to lose a pin. But yeah, so people are saying thanks and peace out, and they're going to sleep and everything else. So
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So we'll see you another time, and everybody can check out your stuff, and I have it in the description. And anything I missed, I ask for people to harass me in the comments section, because this video is live now, but then it like DVRs and it becomes a video people can watch forever. So people write, you know, comments that I missed and how dumb I am. So I'm not no stranger to that. So again, I think I've ended about 5 times. We'll call it. See you later, and thanks for joining in.
All right. Thanks again. Talk to you later.
Yep. Bye.